Know your values. Knowing your values is the invisible armor that protects you from the world's manipulation. It is the foundation upon which every decision, every boundary, and every no stands firm. Most people wander through life reacting to others, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, and following what feels right in the moment. But when you don't define what matters to you, someone else will. Manipulators prey on the uncertain. They sense hesitation, confusion, and the desire to please. The moment you waver, they slip in and convince you that their priorities should be yours. When you know your values, every attempt to control you hits a wall. If honesty is your core value, you spot deceit instantly. If freedom defines you, you sense when someone's tightening their grip. Your values become your internal compass, guiding you through emotional fog and social pressure. They whisper the truth when someone's voice tries to drown it out. Knowing your values isn't about memorizing a list of morals. It's about connecting to what makes you you. It's about remembering the moments that made your soul feel alive and the lines you swore you'd never cross again. When life tempts you to betray yourself for acceptance, your values stand in the doorway and say, no. And that no becomes powerful, not angry, not defensive, but immovable. Because when you stand on your values, you don't need approval, validation, or permission. You become unshakable, and the manipulator realizes something terrifying. They can no longer control you because your loyalty no longer belongs to them. It belongs to your truth. Set boundaries. Setting boundaries is the act of reclaiming your power, of drawing a line between where you end and the world begins. It is not about walls. It is about self-respect. Manipulators despise boundaries because boundaries expose their control tactics. They thrive in blurred lines, in guilt, in your fear of saying no. The moment you draw that invisible line and enforce it, they lose access to the levers they once pulled so easily. A boundary is not selfish. It's sacred. It's you saying, this is how I deserve to be treated. Every time you let someone cross it without consequence, you silently teach them that your comfort is negotiable, and every time you enforce it, you remind yourself that your peace is not for sale. Boundaries are not built with anger, but with clarity. They're not shouted. They're spoken calmly, with conviction, because real strength doesn't need to prove itself. Setting boundaries will trigger guilt at first. Manipulators will test you, guilt-trip you, label you as cold or difficult. But their discomfort is proof that your boundaries are working. You're disrupting the dynamic that fed their power. Boundaries aren't just words, they are actions. It's hanging up when the conversation turns toxic. It's walking away when someone refuses to respect your no. It's choosing silence instead of explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. When you learn to set boundaries, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop dancing to other people's rhythm and move to your own. And when manipulators realize you will no longer bend to fit their expectations, they don't just lose control, they lose access to your energy entirely. Delay response. Delaying your response is one of the most underestimated acts of power. Manipulators rely on urgency, the pressure to decide, to react, to agree. Now, they thrive on emotional heat because that's when your logic is silent, your boundaries blur, and your fear or guilt takes the wheel. When you delay your response, you break their rhythm. You reclaim time, space, and clarity, the very things manipulation tries to steal from you. A pause disarms control. When you say, "Let me think about it," you shift the balance of power. Suddenly, you're not reacting, you're evaluating. The manipulator's script falls apart because they can't feed on your instant compliance. They're left exposed, scrambling for control, realizing they've lost the tempo. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their tactics right back at them. This isn't hesitation, it's strategy. It's the art of breathing between stimulus and response, of refusing to be cornered by someone else's urgency. In that space, your emotions cool, your intuition speaks, and the truth surfaces. Often, what felt like obligation a moment ago reveals itself as manipulation once the fog clears. Delaying response is not weakness, it's composure under pressure. It says, "You will not rush me into decisions that don't serve me." It's the refusal to be emotionally hijacked. And every time you pause before replying to a guilt trip, an accusation, or a demand, you strengthen the muscle of self-control. Because true power doesn't react, it observes, calculates, and responds only when ready. The longer you learn to hold that silence, the louder your authority becomes. Ask for time. Asking for time is the subtle rebellion against pressure, a quiet, deliberate act that says, "You don't control my pace." Manipulators crave immediacy. They want you to commit before you think, agree before you understand, apologize before you even know what you did wrong. Their weapon is speed. Their battlefield is confusion. When you ask for time, you dismantle both. Saying, "I need to think about it," sounds simple, but it's a psychological power move. It signals that your decisions belong to you, not to someone else's urgency. It stops emotional momentum in its tracks. The manipulator feels it instantly. Their spell breaks. You step out of the trance of persuasion and into the realm of reflection. In that pause, you reclaim access to reason, intuition, and self-respect. When you ask for time, you give your nervous system a moment to settle, your logic a chance to breathe, and your true voice the opportunity to rise above emotional noise. The manipulator will often react with frustration or guilt. They'll try to make you feel selfish, ungrateful, or indecisive. That reaction reveals everything. Only those who benefit from your haste fear your clarity. Time is truth's greatest ally. It exposes lies, cools emotion, and reveals motive. When someone pressures you to decide right now, they're not giving you an opportunity, they're setting a trap. But when you ask for time, you're not stalling, you're protecting your freedom. Because wisdom never rushes, it waits, it observes, it answers when the noise fades and the truth finally becomes impossible to ignore. Use the broken record. The broken record technique is your calm defiance against manipulation, a quiet, steady rhythm that cannot be swayed by guilt, charm, or anger. It means repeating your stance, firmly, simply, and without deviation, no matter how many times the manipulator tries to twist your words or wear you down. It's not aggression, it's unshakable consistency. Manipulators feed on reactions. They'll push your buttons, raise their voice, play victim, or shift topics just to make you bend. The moment you engage in their emotional game, you lose ground. But the broken record disarms them because it removes their fuel. You're no longer emotionally entangled, you're anchored. You say your boundary once, twice, and again, each time with the same calm tone, like a mirror that refuses to change its reflection. When you repeat yourself without apology, you send a message: I am not negotiable. You're not explaining, defending, or debating. You're reinforcing it's the art of stillness in a storm. Eventually, the manipulator realizes their tricks. Anger, guilt, flattery bounce off you like rain on glass. The more they push, the more obvious their manipulation becomes. The beauty of the broken record is its simplicity. You don't have to argue or justify yourself. You just return to your truth. I understand how you feel, but my answer is still no. I've already said what I'm comfortable with. That doesn't work for me. Calm repetition dismantles chaos. It drains manipulation of its power because it proves that control only works on those who react, and you, steady, centered, and unwavering, no longer do. Trust your first emotional read. Your first emotional read is your internal alarm system, an instinct honed by experience, intuition, and thousands of silent observations your conscious mind might miss. Manipulators want you to doubt it. They'll charm you, distract you, or label you too sensitive, anything to make you abandon that flicker of unease that whispers, something's off. but that whisper is sacred. It's your truth trying to protect you. When you meet someone and feel that sudden heaviness, that strange discomfort, that quiet tension you can't explain, listen. Your subconscious has already caught what your logic hasn't. It noticed the mismatched tone, the forced smile, the eyes that don't match the words. The first emotional read is the purest signal you'll ever receive, uncorrupted by social conditioning or the need to please. The tragedy is that we've been trained to override it. We tell ourselves we're overreacting, that we should give people a chance, that intuition is irrational, but manipulation thrives in that self-doubt. Every time you dismiss your gut, you silence your greatest defense. Trusting your first emotional read doesn't mean judging others. It means respecting your perception. It's about letting that instinct guide you to pause, to observe, to ask more questions before giving access. The truth always reveals itself, but intuition gives you a head start. When you trust that first flicker of discomfort, instead of smothering it with logic, you become untouchable, because manipulators can fake words, gestures, even kindness, but they can never hide the energy that betrays them, and your intuition, it always feels it first. Check facts. Checking facts is the ultimate antidote to deception. Manipulators weave illusions out of confidence and urgency, not truth. They don't need facts. They need your trust, your emotional reaction, your willingness to believe without question. When you check facts, you pierce their fog. You turn on the light in a room they desperately want to keep dark. Every manipulator relies on one simple assumption that you won't verify. They count on your empathy, your distraction, or your desire to avoid conflict. They use conviction as camouflage, saying things like, "everyone agrees," or "I saw it myself," to make fiction sound real. But when you pause and say, "show me the proof," the power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, they must support their claims, and manipulators hate evidence. Facts demand accountability. Lies demand emotion. Fact-checking is not cynicism. It's self-defense. It doesn't mean you distrust everyone. It means you value clarity over comfort. You learn to separate feeling from fact, story from substance. You stop reacting to tone and start responding to truth. In that moment, emotional manipulation collapses because emotion without truth loses its grip. Checking facts trains your mind to resist control. It builds inner stability because you no longer need to borrow certainty from others. You can find it yourself. And when a manipulator realizes their words no longer move you until they align with reality, they lose their influence. The truth is a quiet force. It doesn't need to shout, threaten, or convince. It simply is. And when you choose to anchor yourself in it, no lie, no matter how beautifully told, can pull you away from your own grounded power. Name the tactic. Naming the tactic is the moment you turn invisible manipulation into something visible, and visibility kills control. Manipulators thrive in confusion, in emotional fog, in the subtle twisting of reality where you question yourself instead of their behavior. The instant you call it out, that sounds like guilt tripping. You're deflecting. That's gaslighting. You flip the power dynamic. They lose the mask. You make the implicit explicit, and the illusion collapses. When you name the tactic, you interrupt the psychological game being played beneath the conversation. It forces accountability where evasion once ruled. The manipulator's greatest weapon is ambiguity. Your greatest defense is clarity. The more precisely you can label what's happening, the less emotionally entangled you become. It's like turning on a light in a room where shadows once made monsters seem real. You don't have to shout or accuse. Calm truth is louder than anger. A steady voice saying, "that's not what I said," or "you're shifting the topic," is a strike straight to the core of their strategy. They expect emotional reaction, not composure. Your clarity becomes confrontation without chaos. This defense is powerful because it transforms manipulation into a pattern you can see and refuse to play in. When you name what's happening, You're no longer inside their story. You're observing it from above. They lose the ability to pull your strings because you've identified the strings themselves. And once you see the mechanism behind their words, you stop hearing power. You hear desperation pretending to be authority. Keep a decision criterion. Keeping a decision criterion is how you anchor yourself in a world that constantly tries to sway you. It means having a clear internal system, a personal rule book that determines what earns your yes and what deserves your no. Manipulators thrive when your decisions are made emotionally, impulsively, or to please others. But when you have a criterion, they lose their grip because your choices no longer depend on their pressure. They depend on your principles. A decision criterion is a filter between you and chaos. It could be as simple as, if it costs my peace, it's too expensive, or I don't commit on the spot. These quiet rules protect you when emotions are high and your mind is clouded. They act as a compass when someone tries to pull you off course with flattery, guilt, or false urgency. Without a criterion, every situation feels unique, every decision negotiable. You get trapped in mental gymnastics, explaining, defending, overthinking. But with one, the answer becomes automatic. It's either aligned or it's not. The manipulator can't exploit hesitation that doesn't exist. People may call you rigid, detached, or too logical, but those words often come from those who once benefited from your uncertainty. Because once you define your standards, you stop being easy to convince. You stop being reactive. You become someone who chooses, not someone who's chosen for. A decision criterion turns your maybe into power. It saves your energy, guards your focus, and silences manipulation before it even begins. It's not cold, it's clarity. And clarity, in a world built on persuasion, is the purest form of freedom. Limit access. Limiting access is one of the most powerful shields you can ever build against manipulation. Control begins with proximity, emotional, mental, or physical. The more access someone has to your time, attention, and private world, the more influence they can exert. Manipulators know this. They infiltrate your routine, your emotions, and your trust until their presence feels normal, even necessary. That's how control is built, not in sudden domination, but through quiet, consistent intrusion. Limiting access isn't about being cold or distant. It's about being selective. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your life. You decide who enters, how long they stay, and how much they see. Every message you answer instantly, every call you pick up out of obligation, every secret you reveal too soon, all of it gives people leverage. And once someone knows what triggers you, what you crave, or what you fear, they can use it. When you begin to restrict access, manipulators panic. They'll sense the shift, the loss of power, and react with guilt, charm, or anger to pull you back in. They'll call you distant, selfish, or different. Let them. Their discomfort confirms your progress. Protecting your access is protecting your peace. It's creating emotional distance so their chaos no longer dictates your stability. It's choosing silence over oversharing, space over pressure, solitude over fake connection. When you limit access, you become unpredictable to manipulators. They can't read you, reach you, or rush you. You stop being an open book they can rewrite and become a locked journal only you can open. That's not isolation, that's power. Avoid oversharing. Avoiding oversharing is one of the most powerful forms of silent strength. Manipulators hunt for information the way predators track scent. They listen not just to your words, but to your emotions, your insecurities, your dreams, and your pain. Every detail you share too early becomes ammunition in the wrong hands. When you overshare, you hand people a map of your mind, your fears, your desires, your triggers, and a skilled manipulator will use every one of them to steer you where they want you to go. Silence is not secrecy, it is strategy. You don't owe your story to anyone who hasn't earned the right to hear it. Real trust is built slowly, through consistency and respect, not through emotional exposure on command. When you withhold unnecessary details, you create mystery, boundaries, and control. You keep your emotional center intact. The manipulator, starved of material, cannot build their narrative around you. Oversharing often comes from a hunger to connect, to be understood. But true connection doesn't require you to bleed for it. When you learn to sit with your own truth without broadcasting it, you cultivate self-trust. And that's what manipulators can never counterfeit. You become unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. People can guess what you think, but they can't weaponize it. Your restraint becomes your protection. Your quiet becomes your power. Because when you stop handing out the keys to your inner world, the manipulators stop knocking, realizing that the door to your mind no longer opens for anyone but you. Practice assertive no. Practicing an assertive no is the art of protecting your peace without apology. Manipulators thrive on hesitation, on the tremble in your voice, on the endless explanations that turn a boundary into a negotiation. Every time you over-explain, you hand them a thread, and they pull until your no unravels into maybe. But an assertive no ends the conversation before control can begin. An assertive no isn't angry, cold, or defensive. It's calm and complete. It carries quiet authority, a tone that says, I have already decided. When you deliver it, you reclaim the energy you once wasted trying to please people who never intended to be pleased. The manipulator will sense the shift immediately. They may push harder, guilt-trip you, or question your kindness, but that resistance is proof that your power has returned to you. The key is simplicity. No, I can't do that. No, that doesn't work for me. No explanations, no justifications, no guilt. Silence after your no is your shield. It forces others to sit with your boundary instead of debating it. Each time you say no with strength, you reinforce your worth. You remind yourself that your time, energy, and emotions belong to you, not to those who see them as tools for their agenda. The assertive no is not rejection. It's self-respect in its purest form. And once you master it, manipulators lose their grip entirely because they realize the word they fear most is also the word that sets you free. Use conditional agreements. Using conditional agreements is the art of taking back control in situations where others try to trap you into blind compliance. It's the difference between surrender and strategy. Instead of saying a flat yes or no, you attach conditions, clear, specific, and on your terms. It sounds like, I'll do that if you do this, or I can agree provided these conditions are met. It shifts the balance of power instantly because manipulators thrive on vague promises and unspoken expectations. Conditional agreements remove both. When you use them, you transform every demand into a negotiation. You are no longer reacting, you're defining the rules. The manipulator expects your submission, not your structure. Your condition forces them into accountability, into clarity. They cannot twist later. Their manipulative charm weakens when met with logic that demands reciprocity. Suddenly, it's no longer about their urgency. It's about fairness, equality, and balance. Conditional agreements also expose intention. If someone's request was pure manipulation, they'll resist your condition or try to guilt you for setting one. That's your red flag. But if their motives are genuine, they'll meet your terms without resistance. Either way, you win. You uncover truth without confrontation. This tactic is quiet power. You're not arguing, you're not refusing, you're simply stating, my compliance has conditions. It's respect without submission, cooperation without control. And when manipulators realize that every request now comes with boundaries they must meet, their influence dissolves. Because the moment you make your agreement conditional, you stop being their pawn and become your own protector. Ask clarifying questions. Asking clarifying questions is how you cut through the fog of manipulation and expose the truth hiding beneath polished words. Manipulators depend on your confusion. They speak in half-truths, twist meanings, and wrap lies in charm because uncertainty gives them power. The moment you ask, "What exactly do you mean by that?" or "Can you explain that again?" the illusion starts to crumble. Their vague authority collapses under the weight of precision. Clarifying questions are truth's scalpel. They slice through emotional pressure and reveal intent. When you calmly ask for specifics, the manipulator feels cornered. They can't rely on ambiguity anymore. They're forced to define their motives, their expectations, their contradictions. And in that moment, their control weakens. They either stumble or retreat because manipulation only thrives in shadows. This defense doesn't require aggression. It's not confrontation. It's curiosity weaponized. Your tone stays calm, your gaze steady, your words simple. The calmer you are, the more their panic shows. You're not arguing, you're dissecting, and nothing terrifies a manipulator more than being truly understood. Questions like, "When did you decide that?" or "Why do you think that's my responsibility?" force accountability. They make hidden assumptions visible. Each question reclaims a piece of your clarity, a piece of your power. When you master this, you no longer drown in someone else's narrative. You guide the current yourself, because the truth doesn't fear questions, only manipulation does. And every time you ask for clarity, you remind the world that your mind is not a playground for someone else's agenda. It's a fortress built on reason, awareness, and unshakable calm. Educate yourself about tactics. Educating yourself about manipulation tactics is the moment you stop being a target and start becoming untouchable. Ignorance is a manipulator's paradise. Awareness is their nightmare. The less you know about the game, the easier it is to play you. But when you learn how the tricks work, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, love bombing, triangulation, you begin to see the strings behind the smiles. And once you see them, the illusion breaks. Knowledge turns confusion into clarity. The very phrases that once made you doubt yourself, "You're too sensitive," "I was only joking," "Everyone thinks this way," become red flags instead of roadblocks. You start noticing patterns, the sudden warmth followed by cold silence, the charm that comes before control, the guilt that replaces gratitude. What once felt personal now feels predictable. That realization alone strips manipulators of their power, because control only works when you don't recognize it. Learning these tactics doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you prepared. It's not about distrusting everyone, it's about knowing what to look for so you can trust wisely. It gives you language for what your intuition already feels, proof for the unease you used to dismiss. Education transforms instinct into understanding and understanding into strength. Manipulators thrive in the shadows of your unawareness. When you start studying the patterns, reading the books, watching the behaviors, you turn the light on, and darkness can't survive illumination. You begin to move differently, calmer, sharper, less reactive, and that shift terrifies manipulators because they realize something they can't undo. You now see the game they've been playing, and you refuse to sit at their table ever again. Keep written records. Keeping written records is one of the most powerful shields against manipulation because memory can be twisted, but evidence cannot. Manipulators thrive in the gray areas of, "I never said that," "You misunderstood me," and "You're overreacting." They weaponize confusion, turning your trust in your own recollection into self-doubt. But when you document things, texts, emails, agreements, promises, you rob them of their favorite weapon, rewriting reality. Written records are not paranoia, they are protection. They turn gaslighting into proof, deception into accountability. Every message saved, every date noted, every detail written down builds a wall of truth that cannot be casually erased. When someone tries to bend the past, your records hold it straight. The manipulator's tone will shift, when they realize they can no longer distort your reality without evidence exposing them. This defense is subtle yet devastating. You don't need to argue or defend your memory. You simply point to the record, calmly, confidently. Watching their story crumble under the weight of facts is power in its purest form. Keeping records also restores trust in yourself. You stop second-guessing what happened. Stop apologizing for remembering correctly. Stop letting others narrate your experiences. You become your own witness, your own advocate, your own proof. Manipulators operate best in the shadows of confusion. Written records turn on the light, and once the light is on, their influence withers because lies, half-truths, and emotional distortions can only survive in darkness. Public commitments. Public commitments are one of the most powerful psychological shields against manipulation. When you declare your boundaries, goals, or standards openly, you transform them from private wishes into public realities. Manipulators operate best in secrecy, in your uncertainty, in the quiet corners where your promises to yourself can be broken without witnesses. But when you make your intentions known, when you say, "I don't loan money," or "I'm focusing on my peace this year," you build a wall of accountability that manipulation cannot easily breach. Public commitment creates internal strength through external structure. Once you've spoken your truth aloud, it becomes anchored not just in your mind, but in the perception of others. It's harder to backslide when your stance is visible, when your circle knows where you stand. Manipulators hate that kind of exposure. They rely on your silence, on your tendency to keep your decisions flexible and private so they can twist them later. But when your boundaries are known, they lose their leverage. This defense also rewires your psychology. Each public declaration reinforces self-trust. I follow through on what I say. It makes hesitation costly and authenticity rewarding. You become less susceptible to guilt and persuasion because your words now carry weight. Public commitments are not about seeking approval. They're about building a fortress of integrity. You create social proof of your strength, and even when doubt creeps in, the echo of your own conviction and the awareness that others have heard it keeps you standing firm. Manipulators can't quietly rewrite your truth when it's carved into the open air. Don't negotiate with threats. Never negotiate with threats, because the moment you do, you teach the manipulator that fear works. Threats are the language of control. They're designed to corner you, to make you trade your peace for safety, your dignity for temporary relief. If you don't do this, I'll leave. If you tell anyone, you'll regret it. If you really cared, you'd prove it. Every threat, spoken or implied, is a trap disguised as urgency. The goal isn't agreement, it's submission. When someone uses threats, they've already abandoned respect. They're not communicating, they're coercing. And the moment you engage, explain, plead, defend, you step into their arena where logic no longer matters. The manipulator feeds off reaction. They want your fear, your guilt, your desperation. The silence that follows your refusal to play that game is what terrifies them most. Standing firm doesn't mean you're heartless. It means you refuse to be emotionally blackmailed. The person who threatens you believes they can control your choices through intimidation, but when you stay calm, breathe, and say, "That's your choice," their weapon dissolves. You remove the payoff, the emotional chaos they crave. Never barter with fear. Fear grows when you feed it with compromise. Courage grows when you face it with composure. You don't have to fight, scream, or prove anything. Your strength lies in your stillness, in the quiet refusal to bend under pressure. Every threat loses power the moment you stop reacting to it. And when the manipulator realizes you will not be controlled by fear, they learn the hardest truth of all. They can only dominate those who believe they must. You no longer do. Use time limits. Using time limits is how you take control of your energy. and prevent emotional or mental hijacking. Manipulators thrive in endless conversations, drawn-out debates, and situations where you feel trapped until you give in. They weaponize fatigue, stretching discussions until you're too exhausted to resist. But when you impose clear time limits, you create boundaries that starve manipulation of oxygen, saying, "I have 10 minutes to talk," or "I can stay until 7, is more than scheduling. It's self-protection. It tells the manipulator that your time is not a resource they can drain at will. It shifts the power dynamic instantly. You stop being reactive and you become the one who decides when engagement begins and ends. That control forces others to respect your limits or lose access entirely. Manipulators hate time constraints because time limits destroy the illusion of endless access. They rely on your willingness to stay just a bit longer, to keep defending, explaining, or comforting. But when you end interactions decisively, you deny them the emotional leverage they crave. Time limits also sharpen your awareness. When you know there's an endpoint, you stay present, intentional, and less likely to get pulled into guilt traps or circular arguments. You can step back before your emotions spiral and reassess what's really happening. This isn't coldness, it's mastery. It's understanding that your time is your life, and whoever controls it controls you. When you set those limits and keep them, you send a clear message. Your energy is valuable, your boundaries are firm, and no one gets unlimited access to your peace. Refuse to justify yourself. Refusing to justify yourself is the quiet act of stepping out of someone else's courtroom. Manipulators love to play judge and jury in your life. They demand explanations, twist your words, and turn your reasoning into a weapon against you. Every time you justify yourself, you hand them ammunition. You invite debate over your choices, your feelings, your boundaries. But when you stop explaining, the game ends. Justification is the trap of the self-doubting. It's the need to prove that you're reasonable, kind, or right. But manipulators don't want understanding. They want control. They don't listen to your reasons. They look for cracks in them. The moment you say, "I don't owe you an explanation," you reclaim the authority over your own decisions. A refusal to justify is not arrogance. It's self-respect. It's knowing that your no is complete without decoration, that your truth doesn't require permission to exist. It's the realization that only people with power over you demand justification. Equals simply communicate. At first, silence feels unnatural. You'll feel the urge to explain, to soften your stance, to make them see your side. Don't. That discomfort is your freedom being born, because every time you stop defending yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you grow stronger. When you no longer explain your worth, your choices, or your boundaries, manipulators lose their grip entirely. They can't twist what you never offered. Your calm refusal leaves them powerless, because the one thing a manipulator can't control is a person who no longer seeks to be understood by them. Ask, "What's in it for you?" Asking what's in it for you is the moment you turn the spotlight on the manipulator. The instant you stop being the stage and start being the director, manipulators thrive in shadows, in assumptions, in the silent acceptance that their motives are pure. But when you ask this question calmly and directly, you drag their intentions into the light. It's not an accusation, it's an awakening. It forces them to reveal the hidden currency of their request, what they stand to gain, what you stand to lose, and whether their interest is really in your benefit or their advantage. This question breaks psychological spells. It interrupts emotional momentum and replaces it with logic. Manipulators count on your empathy, your politeness, your habit of not questioning. They rely on your discomfort with confrontation. But when you ask, "What's in it for you?" you disrupt that script entirely. The air changes, their charm falters, the mask slips, because authenticity welcomes the question, while manipulation fears it. It's not about cynicism, it's about clarity. You're not assuming bad intentions, you're seeking truth. Genuine people will answer with transparency. Manipulators will deflect, over-explain, or guilt-trip you for even asking. Their reaction tells you everything you need to know. This question becomes your filter, your firewall. It cuts through emotional fog and brings balance back to the interaction. Because once you learn to ask, not rudely, but with quiet confidence, you stop being an easy target for hidden agendas. You make people accountable for their motives, and accountability is the one thing manipulation cannot survive. Practice neutral language. Practicing neutral language is how you take the emotional fuel out of manipulation. Manipulators thrive on reactions. They poke, provoke, and twist words until you explode or defend yourself. The moment you raise your voice, justify your choices, or plead to be understood, they've won. Your emotions become their leverage. But when your tone stays calm, steady, and factual, their power evaporates. Neutral language is emotional armor. It protects your peace while exposing their intent. It's not about being robotic. It's about being unshakable. Instead of "that's unfair," say, "I see it differently." Instead of "you always guilt trip me," say, "I'm not comfortable with that." These simple shifts turn emotional chaos into grounded clarity. The manipulator tries to escalate, but your calm becomes their mirror. It reflects their volatility right back at them. The more they push, the less they get. Neutral language creates psychological distance. It tells the other person, "You don't control my emotions." It forces them to face silence where they expected reaction, logic where they wanted confusion. They can't twist calm words into emotional ammunition. You'll notice how quickly manipulators get frustrated by neutrality. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, detached. That's because their hooks aren't working anymore. You've stopped bleeding energy into their game. Neutral language is quiet power. It's authority without aggression, clarity without conflict. It says everything without saying too much. And in the stillness of your composure, the manipulator sees their reflection clearly, loud, desperate, and powerless. Because the calmest voice in the room is always the one in control. Keep money autonomy. Keeping money autonomy is one of the most crucial defenses against control, because financial dependence is emotional dependence in disguise. Manipulators understand this deeply. They know that when they hold the purse strings, they don't need to raise their voice. They can control you with silence, with withheld approval, with the quiet threat of scarcity. Money becomes their leash, and every decision you make starts revolving around what they might allow. Financial independence is not just about wealth, it's about freedom. It's the ability to walk away when something feels wrong without begging for permission or fearing survival. When you have control over your own resources, you can say no without consequence, and that's what makes you powerful. Manipulators lose their grip the moment you no longer need them. They often disguise control as care. "I'll handle the bills. You don't need to worry about that. Just trust me." But behind those words is a strategy to make you comfortable enough to surrender your control. The moment you do, decisions stop being yours. Financial dependence breeds quiet submission, and before you realize it, your autonomy has a price tag. Keeping money autonomy means tracking your finances, having your own accounts, and never outsourcing your financial awareness. It's not about mistrust, it's about self-respect. When you know where your money goes, you know where your freedom lives. A manipulator's influence fades when you don't rely on them to survive. Because power doesn't always come from strength, it comes from choice. And when your finances are yours, so is your life. Limit dependency. Limiting dependency is the art of keeping your freedom intact. Manipulators thrive when you rely on them, emotionally, financially, socially. The more you depend on them, the tighter their grip becomes. They offer help, comfort, and support. But beneath that generosity often hides a contract you never agreed to. "You owe me" dependency is their leash. and every favor, every rescue, every let me handle it for you tightens it. True independence doesn't mean isolation, it means balance. It means you can lean on others without collapsing into them. Manipulators exploit need. They promise to fill the gaps in your life only to make those gaps wider. They want to be the person you can't function without, because that's when obedience begins. But when you diversify your sources of support, your friends, your finances, your confidence, they lose that power. Emotional dependency is their favorite trap. They'll make you believe they're the only one who understands you, the only one who truly cares. But that intimacy is an illusion designed to make you surrender your judgment. The antidote is self-sufficiency, not arrogance, but quiet strength. Learn to meet your own emotional needs, to validate yourself, to soothe your own fears. When you limit dependency, you take the keys back to your own life. You stop needing permission to feel okay. You stop fearing their withdrawal because you no longer need what they control. And that's when their manipulation collapses, because a person who can stand on their own cannot be owned. Learn to spot flattery. Learning to spot flattery is learning to hear the difference between truth and seduction. Flattery isn't kindness, it's currency. Manipulators use it to buy your trust, your compliance, your silence. They shower you with praise, admiration, and validation, not because they see your worth, but because they want something from it. The danger lies in how good it feels. Compliments are emotional sugar. They disarm your logic, make you crave approval, and open doors you'd normally keep locked. When someone flatters you excessively, pay attention to timing. Does the praise come right before a request? Do they inflate your ego just enough to steer you where they want you to go? Genuine appreciation feels calm and specific. Flattery feels urgent, rehearsed, almost sticky. It hooks into your self-esteem and pulls. A manipulator studies what you want to hear, how smart, kind, or special you are. Then they use those words as strings, making you dance to the music of their advantage. Spotting flattery means grounding yourself in reality. It's pausing when your ego lights up and asking, why are they saying this and why now? It's letting compliments pass through a filter instead of straight into your self-worth. Real praise strengthens you. Flattery weakens you because it makes you dependent on the voice that feeds it. Once you learn to hear the difference, flattery loses its spell. You'll still appreciate kindness, but you'll no longer be controlled by it. And when a manipulator realizes their praise no longer moves you, they'll see what you truly are, someone who cannot be bought with pretty words. Set no-gift rules. Setting a no-gift rule is one of the most underrated but powerful boundaries you can draw. Manipulators often use gifts as invisible chains, tokens wrapped in charm but tied with strings of obligation. The gift is rarely about generosity, it's about leverage. They give so they can take later. They create a silent debt, a psychological hook that whispers, "You owe me." A manipulative gift doesn't have to be extravagant. Sometimes it's a favor you didn't ask for, a compliment that feels too heavy, or help that comes with an unspoken price. They'll say, after everything I've done for you, and suddenly, gratitude becomes guilt. Your freedom feels smaller, your choices feel watched, and your independence feels like betrayal. That's why saying no to certain gifts, or to the whole exchange, isn't rude, it's revolutionary. It's you reclaiming equality in the relationship. A real gift requires nothing in return. If something given creates pressure or emotional debt, it's not a gift, it's bait. When you set a no-gift rule, manipulators will act offended. They'll call you ungrateful, accuse you of overreacting, or insist they just wanted to do something nice. But you'll see the truth in their reaction. Genuine givers respect your boundary. Manipulators test it. The beauty of this defense is that it cuts the manipulator's web at its root. They can't buy your compliance, can't decorate their control as kindness. By refusing conditional generosity, you strip their power of disguise, and what remains Your independence, your clarity, your peace is something no one can ever wrap in a bow and use against you again. Use I statements. Using I statements is how you take your voice back from emotional manipulation. It transforms communication from defense to ownership. Manipulators thrive on blame. They twist your words, distort your intent, and corner you into reacting. They say, "You're overreacting," or "You never listen," pulling you into a battle over right and wrong. But when you say, "I feel disrespected when you speak to me that way," you shift the focus back to your experience, not their accusations. I statements disarm the manipulator's favorite weapon, projection. They can argue your opinion, but they can't argue your feeling. It's not an attack, it's a declaration. It says, "This is my perception, my truth, and I own it." That ownership builds emotional armor because you're no longer trying to prove or defend. You're simply stating reality from your side of the fence. Manipulators want reactions, not reflections. They crave chaos. I statements bring calm clarity into that storm. They're rooted in control, not emotion. Instead of, "You're trying to make me feel guilty," you say, "I feel pressured when this topic comes up." That single change pulls you out of their frame and forces them to confront their behavior without giving them ammunition. This simple linguistic shift rewires power dynamics. You become less predictable, harder to provoke, and more grounded. Your communication stops feeding their narrative and starts reflecting your integrity. When you speak from I, you stand in your own authority. You stop pleading to be understood and start embodying understanding. And in that calm, centered truth, manipulation finds no foothold, because clarity, spoken from self, is the language of freedom. Design escape routes. Designing escape routes is not about paranoia. It's about preparation. Manipulators are masters of entrapment. They corner you in conversations, guilt trip you in public, or emotionally trap you in situations where saying no feels impossible. They rely on your surprise, on your politeness, on the awkward silence that keeps you frozen. An escape route is the antidote to that paralysis. It's a pre-planned exit, mental, emotional, or physical, that allows you to leave without guilt, without panic, without explanation. Freedom begins with foresight. When you design escape routes, you train yourself to notice pressure before it becomes control. You know the cues, the tightening in your stomach, the fake warmth in their tone, the sudden shift from charm to demand. You don't argue, you disengage. You say, "I need to step away. I have another commitment," or simply stand and walk out. It's not rudeness. It's survival with grace. Every manipulative encounter depends on your participation. If you can't be cornered, you can't be controlled. Emotional escape routes are just as vital. You stop feeding arguments. Stop explaining yourself to those twisting your words. Stop letting guilt handcuff your choices. You detach before the chaos pulls you in. This is how quiet power feels. Not fighting, not explaining, just leaving. You become unpredictable to manipulators because they never know when you'll step away, and they hate unpredictability. It exposes their dependence on your attention. Designing escape routes means you never walk into a situation without a door of your own making. And when you know you can always leave, you stop fearing control, because no one can trap a person who's already mapped their way out. Keep supportive relationships. Keeping supportive relationships is one of the most powerful defenses against manipulation, because isolation is a manipulator's favorite weapon. When they can cut you off from people who remind you of your worth, they can rewrite your reality. They thrive when you're alone, when your voice trembles, your doubt grows, and no one's around to tell you, "This isn't normal." But when you're surrounded by people who genuinely care for you, manipulation withers in the light of shared perspective. Supportive relationships act like mirrors that reflect truth back at you when your perception is being twisted. Friends, mentors, family, these are your anchors when emotional storms hit. They notice when your behavior changes, when your laughter fades, when you start apologizing for things you didn't do. Their presence becomes your reminder that love doesn't have to hurt, and respect doesn't require control. Manipulators often target those who are empathetic, self-reliant, or afraid to burden others. They exploit that independence, convincing you that no one else would understand. That's the lie that keeps you trapped. The moment you reconnect with your circle, their illusion cracks. Supportive people don't need to fix you. They just stand beside you until you can see clearly again. Keeping those connections alive means checking in even when you feel strong, not just when you're struggling. It's choosing honesty over pride, vulnerability over isolation, because no one stays invincible alone. And when manipulators realize you're backed by love, by perspective, by truth, they know they've lost their grip. You become untouchable, not because you stand alone, but because you no longer have to. Don't accept vague requests. Vague requests are manipulation's favorite disguise. Can you just help me for a bit? I need a small favor. Could you handle this for me? They sound harmless, friendly even, but hidden in their ambiguity is a trap. Vague language creates room for guilt, pressure, and escalation. You agree to something unclear, and suddenly, you're knee-deep in someone else's responsibility, wondering how you got there. That confusion isn't an accident, it's design. Manipulators use it to blur accountability and make refusal look unreasonable. Clarity is your defense. The moment someone asks vaguely, pause and ask, "What exactly do you mean?" or "How long would that take?" Watch how they respond. A sincere person will explain. A manipulator will dodge, flatter, or rush you to agree before you realize what you're committing to. Their urgency feeds on your politeness, on your instinct to be helpful, but you owe no one blind consent. Never say yes to what you don't fully understand. Vague requests turn into endless obligations because manipulators exploit your silence as permission. They'll say, "You agreed," when all you did was nod to something unclear. So demand specifics, time, effort, expectations. If they resist defining it, that's your answer. Refusing vague requests isn't unkind. It's self-respect. It's saying, "I won't walk into a deal where only one side knows the terms." It's protecting your time, energy, and sanity from the slow erosion of just one more thing. Because every manipulative agreement begins the same way, with a small, blurry favor that becomes a chain the moment you stop asking questions. Document patterns. Documenting patterns is how you turn confusion into clarity and protect yourself from psychological warfare. Manipulators thrive in chaos and denial. They rely on your memory fading, your emotions blurring, your second-guessing creeping in. They twist timelines, rewrite events, and insist that never happened. But when you write things down, dates, words, actions, you steal their power to rewrite reality. Documentation becomes your shield against gaslighting. A manipulator's greatest weapon is ambiguity. They blur truth until you start questioning your sanity. Journaling or keeping records re-anchors you in facts. It's not paranoia, it's preservation. When you see the pattern on paper, the same apologies, the same promises, the same cycles, you stop being fooled by isolated moments of kindness. You see the system behind the charm. Every note you take is a reclaiming of truth. It reminds you that your perception is valid, that your memory is trustworthy, even if they cry, rage, or charm their way back in. The evidence stands unmoved, and that stability is something manipulators cannot tolerate because their control thrives on confusion. Writing gives you distance. It shifts the story from emotional chaos to observable reality. You stop asking, "Am I crazy?" and start realizing, "This is a pattern." That awareness is the moment the spell breaks. Documenting isn't just for safety, it's for strength. Over time, those pages become proof of growth, awareness, and resilience. Because once you start seeing the loop clearly, you no longer walk in circles, you walk away, guided by your own undeniable record of truth. Call out double standards. Calling out double standards is the moment you stop playing a rigged game. Manipulators rely on unequal rules, one set for them, another for you. They demand patience but give none, expect honesty while lying, crave loyalty while betraying. This hypocrisy isn't accidental, it's strategic. It keeps you compliant, constantly trying to meet expectations that were never meant to be fair. But when you call it out calmly and clearly, their system of control begins to crumble. Double standards thrive in silence. The manipulator counts on you being too polite, too confused, or too afraid to question the imbalance. They twist morality, making you feel guilty for asking for the same respect they demand. But the moment you say, "Why is it okay when you do it, but not when I do?" the illusion breaks. That simple question pierces the web of excuses they've woven. When you call out the inconsistency, don't argue. State it and let the discomfort hang in the air. Manipulators hate being seen. Exposure is their kryptonite. You'll see them shift, deflect, or accuse you of overreacting. That's the sign you've hit the truth. Calling out double standards isn't confrontation, it's clarity. It's you refusing to live under invisible rules that only serve their control. You reclaim equality in the conversation, forcing them to face the imbalance they've created. And in that moment of truth, their authority falters because control can't survive where fairness is demanded. Avoid isolation. Avoiding isolation is one of the most vital safeguards against manipulation because separation is where control begins. Manipulators understand that when you are alone, your thoughts echo louder, your doubts multiply, and your need for connection becomes their entry point. Isolation isn't always physical, it's emotional too. It starts when they convince you that others don't understand you, that they're the only one who truly cares, that everyone else is against you. Slowly, they build a private world where their voice becomes the only truth you hear. Isolation rewires your reality. Without outside perspective, you begin to question your instincts. You rationalize red flags. You tolerate what once felt intolerable. Manipulators know this. That's why they subtly chip away at your support network, criticizing your friends, sowing distrust, or guilt-tripping you for spending time with others. Each lost connection tightens their grip until your independence feels like betrayal. Avoiding isolation means protecting your access to truth. It means nurturing relationships outside of any single person's influence. It's staying connected to people who remind you who you were before the control started. Call the friend you've lost touch with. Visit family even when you're told not to. Share what's happening, even if it feels embarrassing. Isolation thrives on silence. Connection destroys it. The moment you reconnect, the spell weakens. You start to see patterns, to remember your strength, to feel your own thoughts again. Manipulators fear that moment more than anything, because once you stand in the light of others' love, their shadow can no longer reach you. Set tech limits. Setting tech limits is modern armor against invisible manipulation. The digital world is where control often hides now, not in direct confrontation, but in constant access. Manipulators use your phone like a leash. The endless messages, the late-night calls, the social media monitoring, it all creates the illusion that you owe them your attention. Every notification becomes a tug on your energy. Every "why didn't you reply?" a test of loyalty. And before you realize it, your boundaries have dissolved into pixels. Setting tech limits means reclaiming your right to silence. You don't have to be reachable 24/7. You don't have to explain delayed replies. You don't have to respond to every emotional text written in urgency. When you mute, block, or step away, you're not being rude. You're choosing peace over pressure. Manipulators will notice the shift immediately. They'll accuse you of ignoring them, of being distant or selfish. But that reaction exposes their real intent: control, not connection. Healthy people respect digital space. Controllers fear it. They thrive on immediacy because it keeps you reactive and off balance. When you set tech limits, you slow their tempo, force them into your rhythm, and make them confront their own dependency. Silence is not absence, it's power. It's the pause where your thoughts return to you, where your emotions aren't dictated by a screen's glow. When you turn off that constant stream of noise, you remind the world and yourself that your time, your attention, and your peace belong to you. Because the one who controls their response time controls their reality. Use code words with friends. Using code words with friends is one of the most quietly powerful defenses you can have. It's how you build a lifeline in a world where manipulation often isolates you. Manipulators want you alone, uncertain, and doubting your own perception. They separate you from people who can remind you of who you are. But a code word is a bridge they can't burn. It's a hidden signal of truth when your voice might be silenced, a way to call for help without alerting the one controlling the room. A simple phrase, one that seems harmless to others, can carry enormous strength. It tells your friend, something's wrong, I need you to step in. It could be a text, a random word in conversation, or a phrase like, did you feed the cat, when you don't even have one. These signals become anchors, small, secret acts of rebellion that keep you tethered to safety. Manipulators hate unpredictability, and code words are unpredictable. They strip away their control over communication by creating a network of understanding that operates beyond their reach. It's psychological armor disguised as casual conversation. Using code words reminds you that you're not alone. It restores your power to reach out, to be seen, even in situations designed to make you invisible. Sometimes that one hidden signal can change everything. It can bring help, reveal the truth, or simply remind you that you still have allies, even when fear says otherwise. Because isolation is a manipulator's weapon, but connection, even disguised in a single coded word, is how you fight back without ever raising your voice. Practice boundary rehearsal. Practicing boundary rehearsal is how you prepare your voice before someone tries to take it from you. Manipulators exploit hesitation. They sense the tremble in your tone, the pause before your no, the uncertainty that invites negotiation. But when you rehearse your boundaries, when you've practiced your words and tone, you become unshakable. You no longer stumble, you stand. Boundary rehearsal is emotional training. It's you, in private, saying aloud the words you've always swallowed. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. Please don't speak to me that way. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And when the real moment comes, when someone pushes, pressures, or guilt trips, you respond with calm precision, not panic. Manipulators thrive on catching you off guard. They know most people freeze when confronted, scrambling to justify or appease. Rehearsing takes away that advantage. It rewires your nervous system to associate boundaries with safety, not fear. Every practice round strengthens your confidence until no feels as natural as breathing. You can rehearse with a mirror, a friend, or even a journal. It's not about acting, it's about conditioning. You're teaching your body that standing your ground is not danger, it's dignity. And once that truth lives in your voice, manipulators can feel it. They hear the certainty that cannot be bent. Because confidence isn't born in the moment, it's built before it. Boundary rehearsal turns hesitation into instinct, silence into strength, and fear into freedom. When you've already practiced saying no, no one can ever make you forget how. Refuse guilt trips. Refusing guilt trips is the moment you stop being emotionally blackmailed into submission. Manipulators use guilt as a leash. They pull it tight whenever you begin to walk in your own direction. They twist your kindness, your empathy, your sense of responsibility into weapons against you. After all I've done for you, you're so selfish. I guess you just don't care. These aren't statements of hurt. They're strategies of control. The purpose isn't understanding, it's compliance. Guilt trips work because they strike where you're softest, your desire to be good, loved, and accepted. They blur the line between compassion and obligation until saying no feels cruel. But guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. It's proof of manipulation when it's placed there by someone else's agenda. When you refuse to carry guilt that isn't yours, you strip them of their power. Refusing guilt trips doesn't mean becoming cold or heartless. It means standing in integrity. It's calmly saying, I understand you're upset, but I'm allowed to make my own choices. It's recognizing that love doesn't demand self-betrayal. The manipulator will escalate at first. They'll pout, accuse, or withdraw affection. But that reaction exposes the truth. They were never looking for fairness, only control. When you stop responding to guilt, you become emotionally untouchable. The manipulator can shout, cry, or plead, but your conscience remains clear. You're no longer driven by fear of disapproval. You're guided by what's right for you. And that's when guilt loses its power forever, because you've learned the difference between doing good and being used. Ask for written agreements. Asking for written agreements is how you pull manipulation out of the shadows and into the light of accountability. Verbal promises are the manipulator's playground. They twist words, shift meanings, and rewrite history with a convincing smile. They thrive on ambiguity because when everything is unwritten, nothing is binding, and the truth becomes whatever they say it is. But the moment you ask to put it in writing, everything changes. The mask slips. A written agreement is not just paper, it's clarity. It removes the fog of emotional persuasion and replaces it with concrete terms. Manipulators hate that they stall, deflect, or guilt trip you for not trusting them because they know that once something is written down, it becomes real. It's evidence they can't twist later. When you calmly say, let's document this so we're both clear, you're doing more than organizing. You're protecting yourself. You're turning vague promises into measurable commitments. Suddenly, the manipulator's casual, don't worry, I'll handle it, becomes uncomfortable. They can't hide behind charm or memory games anymore. People with honest intent welcome documentation. It shows mutual respect. Those with hidden motives recoil because written words expose the game. That reaction alone tells you everything you need to know. Putting things in writing doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you untouchable. It's a silent declaration that your trust is earned through consistency, not charisma, because the truth never fears being written down, but manipulation always does. Set consequences and enforce them. Setting consequences and enforcing them is where boundaries stop being words and become power. Manipulators test limits constantly. It's how they measure control. They don't believe what you say. They believe what you do. Every time you threaten a line but fail to act, they learn one thing. Your limits are negotiable, and once they know that, you're no longer setting boundaries. You're performing them. A consequence is not revenge. It's respect. It's the follow-through that gives your no its teeth. When you say, if you lie to me again, I'll walk away, and then actually walk away, you teach people that your words are reality, not decoration. The first time you enforce a consequence, it will feel brutal because manipulators will panic. They'll guilt trip, cry, promise, or rage. That storm is proof you've disrupted their control. The real test isn't setting the boundary. It's surviving the silence after you enforce it. That silence is freedom being born. It's where you stop being the one who bends and start being the one who decides. Manipulators lose interest quickly when they realize their usual tactics no longer work. Enforcing consequences reprograms your entire sense of worth. You begin to understand that your peace isn't negotiable, your respect isn't conditional, and your limits are not suggestions. You become someone who doesn't just demand better, you require it. And in that moment, the manipulator sees something they can't manipulate, a person who means what they say, a person who doesn't just speak boundaries, they live them. Separate facts from feelings. Separating facts from feelings is the difference between being grounded and being controlled. Manipulators know that emotions are the quickest way to cloud your judgment. They don't need to change the truth. They only need to make you feel differently about it. They feed you guilt instead of evidence, fear instead of reason, and shame instead of facts. But when you learn to pause, breathe, and ask, what's actually true here, you pierce the emotional fog they depend on. Feelings are real, but they aren't always accurate reflections of reality. You can feel guilty without having done anything wrong, afraid without being in danger, responsible for someone else's emotions when you're not. Manipulators use this gap to their advantage. They make you question your perception, twist your empathy into obedience, and weaponize your care against you. But truth doesn't vanish just because you feel conflicted. It waits patiently beneath the noise. Separating facts from feelings doesn't mean ignoring emotion. It means holding it alongside logic. It's saying, I feel pressured, but the fact is, I have the right to say no. That statement reclaims control. It roots you in clarity instead of chaos. When you master this, manipulative tactics lose their sting, their guilt trips, their drama, their fake sincerity. All of it slides off because your anchor is in truth, not reaction. And in that balance between heart and reason, you become untouchable. Because emotion can be stirred, but facts stand unshaken. Avoid should language. Avoiding should language is one of the most freeing defenses against manipulation, because should is the word of control. It disguises judgment as guidance, obedience as virtue. Every time someone tells you what you should do, they're implying that your own desires, timing, or instincts are wrong. Manipulators use it like a subtle whip. You should call me more. You should be grateful. You should help. After all, that's what good people do. Each should carries a hidden accusation that you're failing to meet their unspoken expectations. The danger is that we internalize these shoulds. They become the quiet background noise in our minds. I should say yes. I should be nicer. I should just go along. And in that noise, your authentic voice gets drowned out. Should separates you from what you want and replaces it with what others demand. Avoiding should language means reclaiming your authority over your choices. It's shifting from obligation to ownership, from I should to I choose. That small change rewires everything. It turns pressure into freedom, guilt into clarity. When you catch someone using should, ask why. Who benefits from you believing this? Who defines what's right? Manipulators crumble under that question because their control relies on your automatic compliance. Once you stop reacting to should, they lose their shortcut to your conscience. You begin to act from conviction, not coercion. You stop living to please and start living to align. The truth is, you don't owe anyone your obedience. You owe yourself your authenticity. And the moment you stop letting should dictate your life, manipulation loses one of its oldest, sharpest tools. Use a veto right. Using a veto right is the act of reclaiming your sovereignty in any relationship or decision. Manipulators thrive on collective momentum, on making you feel like your voice doesn't matter. Once the group or we have decided, they use consensus as a weapon, rushing you into agreement so that resistance feels selfish. But when you claim the right to say no, without explanation, without negotiation, you introduce a force they can't override, your autonomy. A veto right means you reserve the power to stop anything that violates your values, comfort, or intuition. It's not about control, it's about protection. It tells the manipulator, you don't decide my participation, I do. They hate that because it breaks their favorite illusion that your compliance is guaranteed. When you calmly exercise your veto, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm opting out. That doesn't work for me. You shift the dynamic instantly. The manipulator loses their grip, not because you argued better, but because you refuse to play their game. They'll push back, accuse you of being difficult, or guilt you with, why can't you just go along? But that resistance is proof you made the right call. The veto right is your final line of defense, your non-negotiable boundary. It requires no justification, no debate, no apology. You don't owe anyone access to your agreement, and when you learn to use it calmly, consistently, without fear, you become untouchable because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply says, "No, not this time." Model the behavior you want. Modeling the behavior you want is one of the most powerful, silent ways to reclaim influence and integrity in any relationship. Manipulators try to drag you into their chaos, lying, shouting, guilt-tripping, hoping you'll mirror their dysfunction. They want you reactive, emotional, and unbalanced, because once you match their energy, they've already won. But when you respond with calm truth instead of anger, respect instead of spite, and clarity instead of confusion, you flip their entire strategy on its head. You stop playing their game and force them to meet you in yours. This is psychological judo, using your composure as strength. Your actions become a mirror that exposes the contrast between who you are and who they're pretending to be. When you model honesty, they can't accuse you of deceit without revealing their own. When you model patience, their manipulation looks desperate beside your steadiness. You're not preaching, you're demonstrating. People who manipulate rely on emotional contagion. They spread anxiety and guilt like wildfire. Modeling the behavior you want stops the spread. It sets a new emotional tone. This is how I communicate. This is the energy I accept. The manipulator either adjusts or exits because your calm makes their control tactics ineffective. Modeling is not submission. It's dominance through discipline. It's refusing to be shaped by toxicity, choosing to stand in self-respect so firmly that others must rise to meet you or fall away. You become the emotional standard in the room. And once you lead with integrity long enough, you realize something powerful. Control doesn't come from force. It comes from being unshakably you, no matter who tries to pull you off center. Keep your calendar private. Keeping your calendar private is a silent but powerful act of protection. Manipulators crave access, not just to your time, but to your rhythm, your habits, your vulnerabilities. When they know where you'll be, when you're free, or when you're busy, they learn how to infiltrate your life. They show up by coincidence, pressure you when you're weakest, and disappear when accountability would corner them. Your schedule becomes their strategy, but when you guard it, you take that power back. Your time is sacred real estate. Every hour you own is a declaration of autonomy. Sharing your schedule too freely, especially with those who've shown controlling or intrusive tendencies, hands them a roadmap to your availability, and manipulators don't respect your availability. They exploit it. They call when they know you're alone, appear when you're rushing, or guilt you during your downtime. Keeping your calendar private isn't secrecy, it's sovereignty. You decide who earns access to your time, who gets the privilege of planning with you, and who stays in the dark. You're not hiding, you're managing exposure. Because privacy isn't about having something to conceal, it's about protecting what's valuable. When you start treating your time as something precious, manipulators feel it. They can't predict you, can't corner you, can't dictate your flow. You become unpredictable, and that unnerves them. Guarding your calendar is guarding your life structure. It's the quiet rebellion of saying, you don't get to schedule my existence, because once you control your time, you control your peace, and no manipulator can afford a person who refuses to be timed. Use a neutral third party. Using a neutral third party is one of the smartest and most disarming defenses against manipulation, because it removes the manipulator's favorite terrain, private emotional control. Manipulators thrive in one-on-one settings where they can twist words, distort facts, and rewrite history. They want you alone, cornered, and without witnesses. But the moment you bring in a neutral observer, a friend, a colleague, a mediator, their power begins to crumble. A neutral third party acts like a mirror that reflects truth instead of emotion. They listen, clarify, and hold both sides accountable. Suddenly, the manipulator's tactics, gaslighting, guilt, selective memory, no longer work. They can't claim you misunderstood when someone else heard the same thing. They can't shift the narrative when a neutral presence is there to keep the story straight. The beauty of this defense is its calmness. You're not accusing or fighting. You're simply saying, let's include someone else to help us work through this. It sounds fair, but beneath that fairness lies strategic brilliance. Manipulators hate transparency. They'll try to discredit the third party, call you dramatic, or insist you're overreacting. That's because exposure is fatal to manipulation. Using a neutral third party rebalances the power dynamic. It introduces accountability and forces truth into the open. It shows that you no longer accept private manipulation disguised as personal discussion. When you bring light into dark corners, deceit has nowhere to hide. And that's when the manipulator finally faces something they cannot charm, guilt, or intimidate, a witness who sees them exactly as they are. Don't take ownership of others' emotions. Refusing to take ownership of others' emotions is how you break free from one of manipulation's oldest chains, guilt. Manipulators are masters at emotional outsourcing. They hand you their anger, disappointment, or sadness and make you believe it's your job to fix it. You made me feel this way, they say, turning their feelings into your responsibility, and before you know it, you're apologizing for emotions that were never yours to carry. The truth is, every person is the guardian of their own emotional world. You are not a repair shop for someone else's broken regulation. The moment you start believing you must keep everyone happy to be worthy of peace, you hand over your power. Manipulators sense that weakness like blood in the water. They'll weaponize tears, silence, or rage to control your behavior, teaching you that compliance is the price of calm. But their storm is not your forecast. When you stop absorbing their emotions, you stop dancing to their mood swings. You can empathize without absorbing, care without rescuing, listen without fixing. That detachment isn't cruelty, it's emotional integrity. It says, your feelings are valid, but they're not my fault. Expect backlash when you start this. The manipulator will accuse you of being cold or uncaring because their emotional leash no longer works. But stand firm. You're not abandoning compassion. You're redefining it. Compassion isn't carrying another's chaos. It's refusing to enable it. When you stop owning emotions that aren't yours, guilt loses its grip, shame loses its sting, and manipulators lose their favorite weapon. You stop being their emotional puppet and start being your own peacekeeper. Practice selective sympathy. Practicing selective sympathy is how you protect your heart from being weaponized. Manipulators feed on empathy. They study your kindness, your compassion, your need to help, and twist it into a leash. They cry when you start to walk away, share tragedies when you set boundaries, or make their pain sound like your responsibility. Sympathy becomes their tool of control. But when you learn to give compassion with discernment, not obligation, you transform it from weakness into wisdom. Selective sympathy doesn't mean becoming cold or heartless. It means knowing who deserves your softness. It's the ability to feel for someone without surrendering your stability. When someone's suffering is genuine, your empathy heals. When their suffering is strategic, your empathy fuels their manipulation. The difference lies in intention. True pain seeks understanding, but manipulation seeks control. You recognize it in patterns. The person who always needs saving but never changes. The one who apologizes only to repeat the same betrayal. The one who turns your empathy into emotional debt. Practicing selective sympathy is saying, I can care about you without carrying you. It's compassion with boundaries, love that doesn't self-destruct. When you stop giving your empathy away freely, manipulators panic. Their hooks no longer hold, because guilt can't stick to someone who knows the difference between caring and being controlled. Selective sympathy is emotional maturity. It's realizing that not every tear deserves your tissue, not every story deserves your rescue, and not every pain is yours to fix. It's empathy guided by wisdom, and that balance makes you both kind and untouchable. Ask for alternatives. Asking for alternatives is how you dismantle manipulation disguised as false choice. Manipulators love to trap you in narrow boxes. Two options, both designed to serve them. You can either help me or you don't care about me. You can stay or ruin everything. They present these ultimatums as if they're reality, when in truth, they're cages. But when you calmly ask, is there another option? You shatter the illusion. You introduce freedom back into a rigged game. This simple question is disarming because it exposes the manipulation hiding beneath urgency. It forces the other person to reveal their agenda. Suddenly, they can no longer hide behind emotion or pressure. They have to engage with reason. Often, you'll see the discomfort in their face, the brief flicker of panic when they realize you're no longer reacting. You're thinking. That's when the spell breaks. Asking for alternatives is a refusal to be cornered. It's you saying, I won't choose between losing myself and pleasing you. It transforms power dynamics because it puts you in control of the frame. You're no longer inside their setup. You're standing outside it, redesigning the terms. This tactic isn't about confrontation. It's about curiosity. It's gentle but firm, questioning but calm. And in that calm, the manipulator loses their grip because manipulation depends on panic, not thought. Every time you ask for alternatives, you're choosing awareness over autopilot, self-respect over submission. You remind both yourself and them that there is always another path, and no one gets to decide it for you. Refuse to play their game. Refusing to play their game is the moment you stop being a piece on someone else's chessboard. Manipulators survive through reaction. They bait, provoke, flatter, and guilt until you dance to their rhythm. Their power doesn't come from who they are, but from how you respond. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding them. Their control collapses not because you fought harder, but because you no longer played. Their game is built on emotional triggers. They'll twist your words, weaponize your empathy, or pretend to be the victim to keep you chasing fairness in a rigged system. The rules always shift, the goalposts always move, and every win you think you've earned just becomes the setup for the next trap. But the moment you recognize the pattern and choose silence, composure, or disengagement, you win by default. Refusing to play doesn't mean being passive. It means being strategic. You decide when to speak, what to engage with, and what to ignore. You trade reactivity for control. When they yell, you stay calm. When they bait you, you shrug. When they demand your explanation, you offer none. That calm indifference burns through manipulation faster than any confrontation ever could. The manipulator will push harder at first, anything to drag you back into the emotional arena. But when you don't bite, their performance loses purpose. There's no energy to feed on, no reaction to exploit. Refusing to play their game is quiet victory. It's walking off their stage mid-performance, leaving them alone under the lights. Because the only real power they ever had was the one you gave them. And now you've taken it back. Use facts to reframe requests. Using facts to reframe requests is how you disarm emotional manipulation and drag deceit into the light of logic. Manipulators rely on emotional distortion. They twist feelings, exaggerate urgency, and rewrite reality to make you act before you think. Their strength lies in chaos, in pulling you into arguments fueled by guilt, fear, or obligation. But facts are cold, steady, and immovable. When you respond with facts, you don't just defend yourself, you dismantle the illusion they built. Facts strip manipulation of its drama. When someone says, "You never helped me," and you calmly reply, "I helped you 3 times this week," the spell breaks. When they say, "Everyone agrees with me," and you ask, "Who exactly?" the fog clears. Logic doesn't fuel emotion, it exposes exaggeration. The manipulator depends on vagueness, but precision starves them. Facts reframe the situation from emotional chaos to rational clarity. You're not arguing, you're observing, you're not defending, you're defining. The moment you stop matching their emotional tone and anchor the conversation in truth, they lose control of the narrative. Their tactics bounce off your calm because reality doesn't bend to feelings, no matter how dramatic they are. This defense isn't about being cold, it's about being clear. Facts are your compass in the storm. They keep you grounded when someone tries to spin stories that make you question your memory, your worth, or your sanity. When you master this, manipulation becomes impossible, because no matter how skilled someone is at twisting words, they can't twist truth. And when you stand firm in it, you don't just win the argument, you end the game entirely. Stay physically grounded. Staying physically grounded is how you anchor your power when manipulation tries to shake it loose. Manipulators thrive on emotional disconnection, on getting you lost in anxiety, confusion, or self-doubt until you forget where you stand. They pull you into their storm, hoping you'll abandon logic and chase their approval. But when you stay grounded in your body, when you breathe, feel your feet, and reconnect to the present, they lose their grip. You return to reality while they're still trapped in illusion. Grounding is your reset button. The moment you notice your heart racing, your voice trembling, or your mind spinning, pause, breathe deeply, feel the air fill your lungs, touch something solid. The body doesn't lie. It tells you when something's off before the mind can explain it. That awareness is armor, because manipulation works only when you're disconnected from your own signals. When you're physically grounded, you stop absorbing their chaos. Their urgency feels distant. Their guilt rolls off you. Their words lose their power. You become the calm center they can't control. In that stillness, clarity returns. You hear not just what they're saying, but what they're doing. Grounding is more than a technique. It's self-ownership. It reminds you that your emotions live in your body, not theirs. When you can stay rooted, you can't be swept away. Manipulators want you floating, detached, reactive, disoriented. But the moment you drop back into your body, they lose access to your mind. Because you can't be controlled when you're present. And presence is the most unshakable form of power you possess. Know your limits. Knowing your limits is the foundation of real strength. It's what keeps compassion from turning into self-destruction. Manipulators thrive on people who don't know where their limits are. They sense your desire to be good, to help, to prove your worth, and they stretch it until you're running on empty. They'll say, "You're the only one who understands me," or "I just need one more favor." And before you know it, you've given everything except yourself. But when you know your limits, their game collapses. Knowing your limits isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the voice that says, "I can care about you without sacrificing me." It's understanding that your energy, time, and empathy are finite, and anyone who truly respects you won't demand more than you can give. Manipulators see boundaries as obstacles. Healthy people see them as respect. Limits are your internal compass. They tell you when your body is tired, when your mind is overwhelmed, when your heart has had enough. Ignoring those signals doesn't make you strong. It makes you easier to control. The manipulator counts on your silence, on your willingness to push past your own exhaustion to keep the peace. When you honor your limits, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating your worth. You no longer explain or justify why you're done. You simply are. And that quiet certainty shakes manipulators to their core because they can't guilt someone who knows where their enough begins and ends. To know your limits is to know your power. It's the moment you stop pouring from an empty cup and start protecting the hand that holds it. Use micro boundaries. Using micro boundaries is the art of protecting your peace in real time. Small, consistent acts of self-respect that stop manipulation before it ever takes root. Most people think boundaries are only for big, dramatic moments, cutting someone off, saying a loud no, or walking away entirely. But manipulation often starts in tiny cracks. The interruptions you tolerate, the jokes that sting but you laugh off, the favors you agree to even when you're exhausted. Micro boundaries seal those cracks before they grow into control. A micro boundary is subtle but powerful. It's saying, "Please don't interrupt me," when someone talks over you. It's replying, "I'll check my schedule." Instead of instantly agreeing, it's taking a breath before responding to a guilt trip. Each small act is a thread of self-protection, and together they weave an unbreakable net around your sense of self. Manipulators test limits quietly. They start small, pushing here, probing there, to see where you'll bend. But when every small push meets steady resistance, they realize there's no entry point. Micro boundaries teach others how to treat you long before a major confrontation is ever needed. The real strength of micro boundaries is their calm consistency. You don't need to explain, justify, or defend them. You simply uphold them again and again until respect becomes the only acceptable currency between you and others. When you master micro boundaries, you stop being reactive. You stop firefighting manipulation after it happens. Instead, you prevent it quietly, gracefully, and without apology. Because true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply says no softly, but every single time. Honor small commitments to yourself. Honoring small commitments to yourself is how you rebuild the foundation of self-trust that manipulation tries to erode. Manipulators thrive when you doubt your own word, when you break promises to yourself so often that your no means nothing, even to you. They don't need to overpower you. They just need you to quietly stop believing in your own follow-through. But every time you keep a small promise, a morning walk, a quiet break, a boundary, you remind your mind and body that your word matters. It's not about the size of the act. It's about the signal it sends. When you say, "I'll take 5 minutes for myself," and you actually do, you teach yourself that your needs are valid. That self-trust grows stronger each time you honor it. Soon, your internal voice becomes louder than any manipulator's persuasion. You stop seeking permission to rest, to say no, to choose yourself, because your behavior already validates your worth. Manipulators lose their grip when you become consistent with yourself. They can't guilt you into breaking promises when your identity is built on keeping them. You start radiating quiet certainty, the kind that can't be faked or forced. Honoring small commitments isn't about perfection. It's about integrity in motion. It's proof that you are reliable, not to others, but to yourself. And when your word carries weight within you, manipulation loses its anchor, because no one can control a person who keeps their own promises. Say, "I don't decide under pressure." Saying, "I don't decide under pressure" is one of the most powerful sentences you can ever speak. It's calm, firm, and unarguable, a verbal shield that stops manipulation dead in its tracks. Manipulators rely on speed and emotional chaos. They know that when you're rushed, cornered, or flooded with guilt, you'll make choices that serve them, not you. But the moment you claim your right to time and clarity, you step out of their control and back into your own authority. Pressure is their favorite weapon. They'll say things like, "This offer ends today," or "If you really cared, you'd decide now." The urgency is never about your benefit. It's about cutting off your ability to think. But when you say, "I don't decide under pressure," you're refusing to play their game. You're signaling that your decisions are deliberate, not demanded. This phrase doesn't provoke. It disarms. It carries no anger, no defensiveness, just certainty. It shows that you value logic over manipulation, peace over panic. You don't need to justify or explain it. You simply stand by it. The manipulator will likely push harder, trying to guilt or rush you again, but you repeat it calmly, like a mantra. "I don't decide under pressure." Each repetition reinforces your boundary and drains their power. This simple statement is more than refusal. It's self-respect spoken aloud. It tells the world that your choices are sacred, that your yes has weight because it's never forced, and once people learn they can't rush your will, they stop trying to control it. Leverage silence. Silence is a weapon disguised as restraint, a slow electric force that turns conversation into a revealing mirror where manipulators see their own tactics reflected and unravel. Control feeds on noise, on excuses, explanations, apologies, and rushed acquiescence. When you sit in silence instead of filling the void, their script collapses. The pause becomes a pressure test. It cools your limbic system, pauses the contagion of guilt, and forces the other person to either explain their motives clearly or expose the emptiness behind their demand. Use silence to remove the oxygen from urgency and watch how desperation shows itself in hurried words and shaky promises. When you refuse to answer a baited question, when you withhold the immediate apology that would have bought peace, something human occurs. Others project meaning into that space and often reveal more than they intended. The manipulator will scramble, offer justifications, amplify drama, or contradict themselves. Your quiet becomes a mirror and a challenge. It shows them you no longer follow their tempo, that discomfort is the sound of control slipping. Silence also trains you. Each deliberate pause strengthens your tolerance for discomfort and your ability to observe impulses without surrendering them. It separates emotion from decision, making your responses deliberate rather than reflexive. The more you practice holding the quiet, the more the manipulator's veneer flakes away. Contradictions surface, desperation leaks through, and their arguments lose the polished edges they used to hide behind. Leverage silence as a disciplined skill, calm, unwavering, and unapologetic. Let your stillness do the work. Let the empty space be the place where truth arrives, unaided, and manipulation, starved of reaction, dies slow and exposed, and you remain unshaken. Refuse to negotiate moral compromises. Refusing to negotiate moral compromises is standing guard over your soul when the world or someone in it tries to bargain with your integrity. Manipulators love to blur moral lines. They'll tell you it's not that bad, or everyone does it, or you owe me this. They chip away at your conscience one justification at a time until wrong starts to sound reasonable and betrayal feels like loyalty. The danger isn't the one big sin, it's the slow erosion of what you know is right. When you refuse to negotiate moral compromises, you send a message: my values are not for sale. It's not about self-righteousness. It's about clarity. You know who you are, and you will not bend that truth to make someone else comfortable. Manipulators can't stand that. They thrive on moral gray zones because that's where they can twist guilt, love, and obligation into obedience. When you stay rooted in your ethics, you deny them that power. They'll call you inflexible. They'll mock your standards or accuse you of being judgmental. But beneath that mockery is fear, because integrity is something manipulation cannot corrupt. Every time you choose principle over pressure, you expose their weakness. They can only control people who are willing to compromise themselves. Refusing to negotiate your morals is quiet rebellion in a world of moral shortcuts. It's the strength to lose approval rather than lose yourself. And when you draw that line, you don't just protect your ethics, you protect your freedom, your peace, and the kind of self-respect no one can ever give back once you've traded it away. Use conditional reciprocity. Using conditional reciprocity is how you protect your kindness from becoming a weapon against you. Manipulators exploit generosity like it's a weakness. They take your giving nature, your desire to help, and twist it into obligation. They make you believe that goodness means self-sacrifice, that love means endless giving, and that to say no makes you cruel. Conditional reciprocity ends that illusion. It means you give, but with awareness, intention, and balance. You say, I'll help you with this if you respect my time, or I'll support you as long as this stays mutual. That small condition transforms your generosity into strength. It places both responsibility and respect on the table. It reminds others and yourself that your care is a choice, not a leash. Manipulators hate conditions because they can't hide behind guilt or entitlement when boundaries are clear. Conditional reciprocity builds fairness into your relationships. It's not transactional, it's balanced. It's the quiet understanding that energy should flow both ways, that effort deserves reciprocity, and that love without respect isn't love, it's control. When you practice this, you start noticing who disappears when the exchange stops being one-sided. You see who valued your heart and who valued your usefulness. That awareness liberates you from emotional debt. Conditional reciprocity says, I'll meet you halfway, not carry you the whole way. It's compassion with accountability. And once you master it, manipulators lose their favorite tool, your unchecked generosity, because you no longer give out of guilt, you give out of power. Avoid rescue reflexes. Avoiding the rescue reflex is how you save yourself from emotional entrapment disguised as compassion. Manipulators often present themselves as broken, helpless, or misunderstood, not because they seek healing, but because they know your empathy is their doorway in. They play the victim, so you'll play the savior. The more you rush in to fix them, the deeper you sink into their control. Your kindness becomes your leash. The rescue reflex feels noble. It makes you feel needed, valuable, even heroic. But manipulators exploit that impulse, turning your goodness into exhaustion. They create crises that only you can solve, dramas that keep you hooked, and pain that flares up just as you start to pull away. You end up carrying their emotional baggage while they sit back, watching you burn out in the name of helping. Avoiding the rescue reflex doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing saving with loving. Real compassion empowers others. Manipulation demands you sacrifice yourself. You begin to recognize that adults are responsible for their own healing, and your role isn't to bleed so someone else can feel whole. When you step back, the manipulator panics because your distance exposes their dependence on your guilt. But that's where your power lies, in refusing to be baited by chaos. You can offer empathy without offering rescue, understanding without surrender. The moment you stop leaping into every fire someone sets, you discover the truth. Some people don't want saving, they want control. And by staying grounded in your peace, you stop being their firefighter and start becoming your own protector. Educate others about your boundaries. Educating others about your boundaries is how you turn invisible limits into unbreakable truth. Boundaries mean nothing if they live only in your head. Manipulators thrive in the gray, where expectations are unspoken, where silence is misread as permission. The moment you clearly express what you will and will not tolerate, you remove their favorite weapon, confusion. You turn assumptions into clarity, and clarity into strength. Teaching people your boundaries isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. It's saying, this is how I exist without losing myself. It's calmly communicating what you need before resentment or guilt have room to grow. A manipulator depends on your fear of confrontation. They count on your politeness to keep you quiet. But when you voice your limits directly, you expose their powerlessness. There's no emotional loophole to exploit, no misunderstanding to twist. Just truth they have to face. The key is consistency. Boundaries are not one-time declarations. They are daily reinforcements. Each time you uphold them, you teach others how to treat you. Each time you break them, you teach them that your words are negotiable. Manipulators test limits the way waves test cliffs, but cliffs don't explain, they just stand. When you educate others about your boundaries, you teach the world how to meet you with respect. You shift relationships from control to clarity, from guessing to honesty. Some will adapt, others will leave, But either way, your peace wins, because boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself intact. Practice emotional labeling. Practicing emotional labeling is how you take the steering wheel back from your emotions before someone else grabs it. Manipulators thrive in emotional chaos. They want you reactive, defensive, and too overwhelmed to think clearly. When they can stir your anger, guilt, or fear without you naming what's happening, they can steer your behavior in any direction they choose. But when you pause, breathe, and name the emotion, I feel pressured, I feel anxious, I feel dismissed, you shift from feeling to observing. And the moment you observe, you're no longer being controlled. Emotional labeling transforms confusion into clarity. It separates you from the storm long enough to see what's real and what's manipulation. The human brain calms when emotions are named. Neuroscience calls it affect labeling. It's not weakness, it's self-command. A manipulator wants you to drown in emotion. Labeling gives you a life raft. When you identify what you're feeling, you can also identify why. I feel guilty because they made me responsible for their emotions. I feel afraid because they threatened to leave. Suddenly, their tactics lose their mystery. They're just triggers, not truths. You can't be puppeteered by strings you can see. Practicing emotional labeling doesn't silence your feelings. It honors them. It lets you feel deeply without being ruled by those feelings. Because once you can name an emotion, you can manage it. And when you can manage it, no one else can use it against you. That's the power manipulators fear most. The calm, grounded awareness of someone who feels everything but obeys nothing. Limit exposure to dramas. Limiting exposure to dramas is how you reclaim peace from emotional chaos. Manipulators thrive in drama. It's their stage, their oxygen, their camouflage. They create storms to keep you distracted, emotionally drained, and too overwhelmed to notice the control creeping in. Every argument, crisis, or guilt trip pulls you further from your center until their instability becomes your normal. But the moment you limit your exposure, the curtain drops, their performance loses its audience, and their power fades with the silence that follows. Drama is designed to hook your empathy and hijack your attention. It makes you feel responsible for fixing what you didn't break. Manipulators use this to keep you invested, to make you chase peace in a situation they never intend to calm. But when you choose distance over reaction, detachment over rescue, you stop feeding their fire. You learn that not every cry for help is a call for healing. Some are just bait for control. Limiting exposure doesn't mean apathy. It means emotional hygiene. You protect your peace by deciding which problems are yours to hold and which are distractions in disguise. The less time you spend inside chaos that isn't yours, the more clearly you can see what truly is. When you stop showing up to every argument, every meltdown, every crisis that isn't yours to fix, manipulators panic. Their spotlight dims, their noise echoes unanswered, and that's when your power returns. Not through confrontation, but through silence, because the one who walks away from drama is always the one who ends it. Use the fog test. Using the fog test is how you recognize when someone is trying to cloud your mind with confusion instead of clarity. Manipulators thrive in mental fog. They twist timelines, distort words, and flood you with contradictions until you can't tell what's real anymore. They'll say one thing, mean another, and then accuse you of misunderstanding. The goal isn't communication, it's control. The fog test helps you see through it. The fog is that heavy feeling of confusion that settles in your chest after certain conversations. You walk away doubting yourself, replaying the words, wondering if you're the problem. That's your signal. Healthy communication leaves you clearer. Manipulation leaves you hazy. The fog test is simple. When you feel confused, stop. Don't respond. Don't agree. Don't apologize. Step back until you can see straight again. Manipulators rely on your rush to make sense of things. They want you explaining, defending, or trying to fix the misunderstanding. But the fog test flips the script. Instead of reacting, you recognize. If it's foggy, it's false. Clarity is truth's companion. Confusion is control's disguise. When you start using the fog test, you begin trusting your own perception again. You learn that disorientation is not weakness. It's a warning. You no longer chase clarity from the person who caused the confusion. You find it within yourself. The fog test is your internal compass. It doesn't need proof, it needs awareness. If you can't see clearly, it's not time to move. Step back, breathe, and wait for the fog to lift, because truth never hides in confusion, and anyone who thrives there doesn't deserve your trust. Watch for love bomb cycles. Love bomb cycles are the manipulator's most seductive illusion, the perfect storm of affection and control. At first, it feels like destiny, endless praise, constant attention, grand gestures that make your heart race. They text every morning, compliment every word you say, and mirror your soul so precisely it feels faded. But it isn't love, it's strategy. The purpose of the love bomb isn't to bond, it's to bind. They drown you in admiration to create dependency, to make you crave the high of their approval. Then, just as suddenly, the warmth disappears. The texts stop, the tone changes, the affection fades. You're left desperate, wondering what you did wrong, chasing the version of them that once made you feel like the most special person in the world. That confusion isn't accidental, it's engineered. It's the emotional push and pull that keeps you hooked, trying harder, giving more, losing yourself piece by piece. Watching for love bomb cycles means recognizing that intensity is not intimacy. Real love grows in truth, not in urgency. The manipulator's affection burns bright, but fast, too perfect, too soon, too much. The compliments feel rehearsed, the attention suffocates, and the devotion feels performative. Once you notice the pattern, idealize, withdraw, punish, you begin to see the control behind the charm. When you step back from the cycle, you reclaim your emotional rhythm. You stop chasing validation and start observing patterns. The manipulator will try to restart the loop with sudden affection, but you'll see it for what it is, bait. And when you stop responding to the highs and lows they control, the spell breaks. Love stops being a weapon and becomes yours to define again. Set professional boundaries. Setting professional boundaries is how you protect your integrity, time, and mental clarity from being quietly consumed by others' demands. Manipulators in the workplace rarely shout or threaten. They charm, flatter, and pressure you into overgiving. They'll frame exploitation as team spirit, urgency as opportunity, and your exhaustion as commitment. But every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach them that your effort is infinite and your limits are negotiable. Professional boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They separate respect from exploitation, collaboration from control. When you say, "I'm not available after hours," or "I'll need that request in writing," you're not being difficult, you're being deliberate. You're anchoring your worth in action. The manipulator feels it instantly. Their easy access is gone, their subtle leverage cut off. You've turned obligation into choice, and that unnerves them. In toxic workplaces, people who set boundaries are often painted as cold or uncooperative. That's because healthy limits expose unhealthy expectations. But over time, your consistency earns respect, even from those who resist it. Boundaries don't just protect your time, they teach others how to treat you. Setting them takes courage. It means refusing unpaid emotional labor, declining last-minute crises that magically become yours, and stepping away from colleagues who mistake kindness for weakness. Each limit you draw builds an invisible perimeter around your peace, a reminder that your professionalism is not for sale. Because when you set professional boundaries, you stop surviving work, you start leading it. You move from being controlled to being respected, and that quiet shift changes everything. Avoid because I said so compliance. Avoiding because I said so compliance is how you break free from authority that demands obedience instead of respect. Manipulators love this phrase, not always in those exact words, but in spirit. It's the voice of control disguised as confidence. Just trust me. Don't question it. I know what's best for you. These statements are meant to shut down your thinking, to replace your judgment with theirs. The moment you obey without understanding, you hand them the keys to your freedom. Because I said so is not logic, it's domination. It demands submission, not cooperation. It thrives in environments where questioning is labeled as disrespect. Manipulators rely on that dynamic. They want you to feel that resistance is rebellion, that obedience equals love or loyalty. But obedience without comprehension is surrender. And once you surrender your right to ask why, you start living someone else's truth instead of your own. Avoiding this kind of compliance means reclaiming your curiosity. It means daring to say, explain it to me, or I need to understand before I agree. You're not being defiant, you're being discerning. Manipulators will try to shame you for it, calling you difficult or ungrateful, but that's just the sound of their control cracking. When you stop following commands without context, you reawaken your autonomy. You remind yourself that respect flows both ways, that your consent, your understanding, and your logic matter. Refusing because I said so isn't rebellion, it's self-respect in action, because no truly trustworthy person fears your questions. Only the controlling do. Practice humility about being wrong. Practicing humility about being wrong is one of the most liberating defenses against manipulation because it removes the easiest button. Manipulators love to press your ego. They prey on your need to be right, to be seen as good, smart, or consistent. The moment you cling to your image instead of the truth, you become vulnerable. They'll twist facts, provoke defensiveness, and make you fight harder to protect pride instead of clarity. But when you can calmly say, I might have been wrong, you take that power away. There's nothing left for them to weaponize. Humility is not weakness. It's emotional intelligence. It's the strength to prioritize truth over victory. When you admit a mistake, you close the door to manipulation through guilt or shame. The manipulator can no longer corner you with accusations because you've already owned your part. You disarmed them completely by standing in the light of your own honesty. This kind of humility builds inner peace. It means you no longer fear being exposed because you have nothing to hide. It teaches you to listen instead of react, to learn instead of defend. The manipulator's favorite trick, making you justify yourself, no longer works because you're not chasing validation. You're chasing understanding. When you practice humility, you become untouchable, not because you're flawless, but because you're fearless. You've made peace with imperfection, and in doing so, you've denied manipulators their most powerful weapon, your insecurity. They can't shame you into submission, can't trap you in argument, can't distort your self-worth, because you already own your humanity, and that makes you unbreakable. Watch for love bomb cycles. Love bomb cycles are the manipulator's most seductive illusion, the perfect storm of affection and control. At first, it feels like destiny, endless praise, constant attention, grand gestures that make your heart race. They text every morning, compliment every word you say, and mirror your soul so precisely it feels fated. But it isn't love, it's strategy. The purpose of the love bomb isn't to bond, it's to bind. They drown you in admiration to create dependency, to make you crave the high of their approval. Then, just as suddenly, the warmth disappears, the texts stop, the tone changes, the affection fades. You're left desperate, wondering what you did wrong, chasing the version of them that once made you feel like the most special person in the world. That confusion isn't accidental, it's engineered. It's the emotional push and pull that keeps you hooked, trying harder, giving more, losing yourself piece by piece. Watching for love bomb cycles means recognizing that intensity is not intimacy. Real love grows in truth, not in urgency. The manipulator's affection burns bright but fast. Too perfect, too soon, too much. The compliments feel rehearsed, the attention suffocates, and the devotion feels performative. Once you notice the pattern, idealize, withdraw, punish, you begin to see the control behind the charm. When you step back from the cycle, you reclaim your emotional rhythm. You stop chasing validation and start observing patterns. The manipulator will try to restart the loop with sudden affection, but you'll see it for what it is: bait. And when you stop responding to the highs and lows they control, the spell breaks. Love stops being a weapon and becomes yours to define again. Use parallel decision-making. Using parallel decision-making is how you escape the manipulator's favorite illusion, that your choices exist in isolation. Manipulators thrive when they can corner you in secrecy, making you feel like it's just between us, that you shouldn't ask for advice that no one else would understand. They isolate your judgment so they can quietly rewrite your logic. But when you bring others into your decision-making, trusted friends, mentors, family, you shatter that illusion. You create a network of truth where manipulation cannot breathe. Parallel decision-making means you don't decide in a vacuum. You pause, seek a second perspective, and let clarity form in conversation, not confusion. A manipulator hates that because it removes their monopoly on your perception. They lose control of the narrative the moment you ask, "What do you think?" to someone they can't influence. Suddenly, the spell of urgency and emotion breaks under the light of an outside voice. This isn't dependence, it's wisdom. It's understanding that objectivity fades when emotion is high and that other minds can catch what you can't. Manipulators rely on momentum. Parallel decision-making slows that down. It adds filters of reason and reality where once there was only pressure. You'll notice how a manipulator reacts when you mention asking someone else's opinion. They'll discourage it, mock it, or try to make you feel disloyal. That's your signal you're doing exactly what they fear. Using parallel decision-making protects your autonomy because it connects it. It ensures your choices aren't swayed by one voice, one emotion, one cleverly planted guilt trip. It's the act of saying, "I trust my judgment enough to test it against the truth." And truth, when shared, is manipulation's natural antidote. Keep small assets separate. Keeping small assets separate is one of the most practical and underestimated defenses against manipulation. Financial control doesn't always begin with big things. It starts with the small ones: the shared credit card, the joint phone plan, the "I'll cover it, don't worry" gestures that seem harmless at first. Slowly, those small dependencies accumulate until your freedom has a price tag attached to someone else's approval. Manipulators know this well. They don't take your independence overnight. They chip away at it transaction by transaction, favor by favor, until walking away feels impossible. When you keep small assets, savings, passwords, accounts, even personal items under your own control, you maintain leverage. It's not about greed, it's about security. It's knowing that you can survive, decide, and move freely without financial permission. Even a small fund that's yours alone is a psychological fortress. It tells your subconscious, "I can take care of myself," and that belief alone dismantles the fear manipulators rely on. They often mask control as care. "It's easier if I manage the money," or "You don't need to worry about that." But control hidden behind kindness is still control. Keeping something separate, a card, a fund, a backup plan, isn't distrust. It's wisdom. It's saying, "I hope for peace, but I prepare for power," because money, no matter how small, equals options, and options equal freedom. And when you hold even a fraction of your own financial independence, manipulators can't trap you. They can ask, persuade, or guilt, but they can't own your next move. Recognize projection. Recognizing projection is how you stop accepting blame for emotions and actions that aren't yours. Manipulators are masters of psychological inversion. They accuse you of what they are doing. If they're lying, suddenly you're dishonest. If they're angry, they say you're overreacting. If they're controlling, they call you manipulative. This isn't coincidence, it's camouflage. Projection is their way of shifting guilt, confusing reality, and keeping the spotlight off themselves. When you don't recognize projection, you get trapped defending yourself against false accusations. You start proving your innocence, explaining your intentions, trying to calm the situation. Meanwhile, the manipulator quietly escapes accountability, watching you fight a battle they created. But once you understand the tactic, you stop playing. You realize that their accusations are confessions in disguise. Projection is emotional misdirection. It's designed to make you question your character instead of their behavior. The moment you feel that gut-twisting injustice, when someone blames you for something wildly out of alignment with who you are, pause. That discomfort is your signal. Ask yourself, is this about me or is this about them? Recognizing projection doesn't require confrontation. It requires clarity. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to see it. When you do, the emotional hook dissolves. Their words lose weight because you know the truth. They're describing themselves. The power of this awareness is quiet but absolute. You stop internalizing poison that was never yours to carry. And in that stillness, projection fails because it only works on those who doubt their own reflection. Refuse triangulation. Refusing triangulation is how you stop manipulators from turning connection into chaos. Triangulation is the silent art of pulling a third person into conflict to distort truth, divide loyalty, and control perception. It's when someone says, "Everyone thinks you're overreacting," or "I heard they said something about you," planting invisible seeds of tension that grow into mistrust. The manipulator becomes the puppet master, standing safely in the middle while others battle in confusion. It's not communication, it's control, disguised as concern. Triangulation thrives in secrecy and emotional reactivity. The manipulator gossips to one person, flatters another, and misquotes both until no one knows who to trust. They feed on insecurity, subtly rewarding those who take their side and punishing those who question them. But the moment you refuse to play, when you say, "I'll talk to them directly," or "Please leave me out of that," the triangle collapses. Their web depends on your participation, and silence starves it. Refusing triangulation means protecting relationships with clarity, not assumption. It means believing that adults can speak for themselves, that truth doesn't need a messenger. It's choosing directness over drama, even when it's uncomfortable. The manipulator will try to paint you as cold, disloyal, or naive for stepping out, but what they really fear is exposure. When you stop letting people speak through you or for you, you reclaim your voice. You turn rumor into dialogue, confusion into honesty, division into understanding, and the manipulator, robbed of their favorite game, stands alone, surrounded by the silence of those who finally learn to talk to each other instead of about each other. Use a firm closing line. Using a firm closing line is how you end manipulation's endless loop. Manipulators feed on open doors, unfinished arguments, half answers, and the need to have the last word. They circle back, reframe, guilt trip, and drag you into repeating yourself until exhaustion replaces clarity. But a firm closing line is your full stop. It's not loud or defensive, it's final. It signals that the conversation is over, your boundary is set, and no emotional bait will reopen it. A firm closing line is simple yet powerful. This discussion is over. I've made my decision. We're not revisiting this. The power lies not in the words, but in the calm conviction behind them. Manipulators will push back, mock your tone, accuse you of being rude, or demand explanations. But you don't engage. Your silence after that line becomes the exclamation mark. This defense works because manipulators thrive on engagement. Every extra sentence is fuel. Every attempt to justify or explain reopens the door they're desperate to keep ajar. But when you end the exchange with steadiness, not anger, they lose the script entirely. The control they crave, through chaos, confusion, or guilt, dies in the quiet that follows your boundary. Using a firm closing line teaches people that your no means no, not convince me. It's emotional discipline disguised as simplicity. The more consistent you are, the faster manipulators learn they can't wear you down with persistence. A firm closing line is more than words. It's the sound of self-respect. It's the echo of a door closing softly yet permanently behind manipulation. And in that silence, your peace begins again. Avoid bargains with vague timelines. Avoiding bargains with vague timelines is how you stop manipulators from stringing you along with empty promises. They love the comfort of soon, later, or when things get better. It's the illusion of progress without the responsibility of follow-through. They promise commitment, change, or reward, but never a date, never a plan. And while you wait, they feed on your patience, your hope, your loyalty. Time becomes their leash, and you stay trapped in a story that never moves forward. Vague timelines are the manipulator's favorite escape hatch. They give just enough reassurance to keep you from walking away, while never delivering the reality you deserve. They'll say, "I'll pay you back soon," or "I'll change once things calm down," or "We'll make it official eventually." Each phrase is a hook coated in comfort, but the truth is, eventually never comes. The longer you wait, the more control they gain, because your investment, emotional, financial, or professional, deepens while theirs stays minimal. When you start demanding clarity, specific dates, clear actions, defined terms, you disrupt their entire strategy. Manipulators hate deadlines because deadlines create accountability. They strip away ambiguity and expose intention. If someone truly means to follow through, clarity empowers them. If they don't, it exposes them. Avoiding vague bargains doesn't make you rigid, it makes you real. It protects your time from being wasted on false hope and your energy from being drained by endless waiting, because real promises have timelines. Lies have someday, and when you stop living for someday, manipulators stop living off your belief in it. Maintain a life outside the relationship. Maintaining a life outside the relationship is one of the most vital protections against emotional control. Manipulators seek to become your everything, your comfort, your confidence, your social circle, even your sense of purpose. They isolate you not always by force, but by seduction. They make their attention feel so consuming, so intoxicating that the rest of your world starts to fade. And when you finally look up, you realize your universe has shrunk to one person, and they're the one holding it. Having your own life, friends, hobbies, goals, and private time isn't disloyalty. It's self-preservation. Independence keeps your perspective clear. When you nurture other connections, you gain mirrors that reflect truth back to you. Healthy friends remind you of who you are when manipulation tries to rewrite your identity. They ground you in reality when someone else tries to bend it. Manipulators fear your independence because it limits their control. The more fulfilled and connected you are outside of them, the less power they have to define your worth. They may subtly discourage it. "We don't need anyone else. They don't understand us. You're different now." But those words are not love. They're containment. Maintaining your own life keeps you vibrant, unpredictable, and whole. It reminds you that love should expand your world, not shrink it. A healthy relationship complements your individuality. It doesn't consume it. So go, live, connect, grow. Because the strongest version of you isn't found in someone's shadow. It's found in the light of your own freedom. And when you live that way, no manipulator can ever convince you that isolation is love again. Reframe requests as requests. Reframing requests as requests is how you pull hidden manipulation into the open and reclaim your freedom to choose. Manipulators love to disguise demands as duties, spoken softly but heavy with expectation. You're the only one I can count on. I thought you'd want to help. If you really cared, you'd do this. Each phrase is crafted to sound like a request, but beneath it lies an assumption. You owe me. When you reframe these statements as what they truly are, optional requests, you expose the illusion of obligation. This technique is psychological alchemy. It turns pressure into perspective. When someone says, "You have to," you mentally translate it into, "They want me to." That single shift returns the decision to you. It removes guilt's grip and gives you back the power to say yes or no based on truth, not emotional manipulation. You stop reacting to tone and start responding to intent. The manipulator's strength lies in your automatic compliance. They count on your empathy, your politeness, your instinct to help. But when you reframe their words, you cut the emotional wire they're tugging. Their need becomes simply a preference, and preferences can be declined. Reframing requests teaches you to see through emotional theater. It lets you pause and ask, is this truly my responsibility or just their expectation? That clarity is armor, because once you see a demand for what it is, you no longer carry the weight of false duty. You carry the freedom of conscious choice. And in that moment, the manipulator realizes their authority over you was never real. It was borrowed from your belief that you had none. Keep a values checklist. Keeping a values checklist is like carrying a compass through a fog of persuasion. Manipulators thrive when you lose sight of your core, when they can twist your empathy into guilt, your kindness into compliance, and your loyalty into a leash. But when you keep a written list of your values, your non-negotiables, you create a map that always leads you back to yourself. It's not about rules, it's about remembrance. Because in the heat of pressure, when emotions blur your vision, your values are the only steady light left. A values checklist isn't philosophical, it's practical. It reminds you, I don't lie, I don't betray myself, I don't trade peace for approval. When you're pulled into emotional chaos or moral gray zones, you look at that list and instantly know what aligns and what doesn't. Manipulators hate that because it removes their greatest weapon, confusion. They can't gaslight someone who measures actions against written truth. Writing it down is an act of grounding. It turns vague ideals into tangible armor. Every time you reference it, you reinforce your identity. And when someone tries to convince you to bend just this once, you'll feel the weight of those words calling you home. A values checklist doesn't make you rigid. It makes you real. It filters choices, calms uncertainty, and silences guilt. You stop asking, am I overreacting? And start asking, does this match who I am? That single shift ends manipulation before it begins. Because when you live by your values, you're no longer moved by persuasion. You're guided by principle. Practice active listening, not agreeing. Practicing active listening without automatically agreeing is one of the most powerful ways to stay mentally free in the face of manipulation. Manipulators confuse listening with surrender. They count on your politeness, your empathy, your desire to make others feel heard. They pour their version of reality into your silence, expecting your nods and soft responses to mean compliance. But real listening doesn't mean believing. It means observing, decoding, and holding space without giving up your stance. Active listening is power disguised as patience. It allows you to gather information while revealing nothing you don't want to give. You hear their words, tone, and motives, but you don't get pulled into their emotional current. You become the calm observer instead of the participant in their game. The manipulator feels your attention, but not your agreement, and that unnerves them because their control depends on emotional buy-in. When you practice this skill, you shift the dynamic completely. You respond with phrases like, I hear what you're saying, or that's interesting, instead of automatic validation. You give presence without surrender. You learn to read patterns rather than react to pressure. In that silence, you gain power, the ability to understand them more than they understand you. Manipulators mistake agreement for control. When you separate the two, you break their script. You can listen deeply while staying detached, compassionate without being convinced, because real strength isn't in winning the argument, it's in refusing to be hypnotized by the sound of someone else's narrative. Use conditional praise. Using conditional praise is how you take back control of positive reinforcement, turning flattery into a tool of balance instead of manipulation. Manipulators love to use praise as a leash. They'll flood you with compliments when you comply and withhold warmth when you resist. It's their way of teaching your nervous system that approval equals obedience. Over time, you start chasing validation just to feel safe. But when you use conditional praise, the power shifts. You decide when and how appreciation is given, and only in response to genuine respect, accountability, or effort. Conditional praise isn't about manipulation. It's about boundaries. It means you reward what's healthy, not what's harmful. You stop offering blanket approval just to keep the peace. When someone takes responsibility, you acknowledge it. When they cross a line, you don't pretend it's fine. This kind of selective affirmation teaches people how to treat you without hostility or drama. It's calm, deliberate, and consistent. Manipulators crumble under conditional praise because it removes their emotional control. They can no longer earn your affection through charm alone. They have to meet the standard of truth. You're no longer feeding their ego automatically. You're requiring reciprocity. The key is authenticity. Conditional praise isn't cold, it's conscious. It's warmth that's earned, not demanded. It communicates, I value honesty, I respect effort, I notice integrity. It's love with backbone. And that subtle shift changes everything. You move from being trained by someone else's approval to shaping your own emotional environment. When praise becomes conditional on respect, manipulators lose their favorite weapon, because you've turned validation into choice, and choice into power. Call out inconsistencies calmly. Calling out inconsistencies calmly is how you turn manipulation's greatest strength, confusion, into its downfall. Manipulators depend on contradictions. They'll tell one story today and another tomorrow, twisting facts to fit whatever benefits them most. They rely on your emotional reaction to distract you from the lie. They want you flustered, defensive, second-guessing what you remember. But when you stay calm and simply point to the contradiction, yesterday you said something different, the illusion fractures. You hold up a mirror they can't escape from. The power lies in your composure. Anger feeds their drama. Calm exposes their inconsistency. When you deliver the truth without hostility, they can't shift the focus onto your tone or emotion. They have to face the discrepancy itself. Manipulators fear facts delivered with stillness. It leaves them nowhere to run. You become the eye of the storm, unmoved while their story unravels around you. They'll try to wriggle free. They'll accuse you of misunderstanding, gaslight your memory, or flood the conversation with irrelevant details. Don't follow. Repeat the contradiction, softly and clearly. That's not what you said before. Each repetition tightens the truth around them, and their performance begins to crack. This defense isn't confrontation, it's clarity. It's showing that you see, remember, and refuse to be distracted. Calm truth is radioactive to manipulation. It burns through deceit without you raising your voice, because when you can calmly hold someone accountable to their own words, you shift from the role of the controlled to the controller. You stop being their target and become their truth. Don't barter your dignity. Never barter your dignity. Not for love, not for approval, not for peace. Manipulators will try to convince you that sacrificing a piece of yourself is the price of keeping them happy. They'll make humiliation look like compromise, submission look like care, and silence look like maturity. But every time you give up a little of your self-respect to maintain harmony, you teach them that your worth is negotiable, and once they know that, they'll keep asking for more. Dignity isn't pride, it's your anchor. It's what keeps you standing when guilt, charm, or fear try to pull you down. A manipulator's goal is to make you believe that being respected is less important than being accepted. They want you to apologize for your strength, to feel ashamed for having standards. They want you small enough to control, but dignity doesn't shrink. It rises. It's the quiet, unwavering voice that says, I will not lower myself to be loved. There will be moments when keeping your dignity costs you something, someone's approval, a relationship, a job, but losing those things is never as devastating as losing yourself. The manipulator's affection is conditional. Your self-respect is not. When you refuse to barter it, they'll rage, guilt, or beg, but they'll also reveal their dependence on your submission. Standing tall in your dignity means walking away when others expect you to kneel. It's grace under pressure, silence in the face of mockery, calm when they try to provoke chaos. Because once you learn that your dignity is not a bargaining chip, it's the currency of your worth, you stop trading it for anything less than truth. Learn basic negotiation. Learning basic negotiation is how you transform from someone who gets persuaded to someone who sets the terms. Manipulators rely on your discomfort with confrontation. They know most people mistake negotiation for conflict, and they exploit that fear to get what they want. They use guilt, urgency, and emotional framing to make you fold before the conversation even begins. But when you understand negotiation, not as a fight, but as a skill, you stop reacting to pressure and start shaping outcomes. Negotiation is the art of balance. It teaches you to recognize leverage, stay calm under persuasion, and ask for what you deserve without apology. Manipulators depend on emotional shortcuts, your need to be liked, your fear of rejection, your instinct to people please. But negotiation rewires that instinct. It replaces emotion with clarity, guilt with logic, and desperation with choice. You learn to listen for motives instead of just words, to counter offers instead of accepting ultimatums. Basic negotiation skills, knowing your bottom line, staying silent when needed, and never agreeing to the first offer, make you unmanageable. You start walking into conversations with structure instead of nerves. You no longer crumble under pressure because you understand the power of options and timing. Manipulators thrive in imbalance. Negotiation creates equilibrium. It reminds both sides that every exchange requires mutual respect. And when you master it, you no longer fear confrontation. You welcome it because you know how to navigate it with control, composure, and intelligence. Because negotiation isn't about getting everything you want. It's about ensuring no one ever takes what you didn't agree to give. Limit favors. Limiting favors is how you protect your generosity from becoming someone else's tool of control. Manipulators don't always demand power. They earn it by pretending to need help. They'll start with small requests, harmless at first, to test your boundaries. A ride here, a quick errand there, a favor, just this once. But each yes conditions you to say yes again. Before you realize it, you're trapped in a cycle of obligation, where kindness becomes expectation and refusal feels like betrayal. Favors are the manipulator's silent contract. Every act of help they receive becomes emotional debt you never agreed to owe. They'll remind you of everything you've done, twisting your compassion into guilt. After all I've asked of you, they'll say, you can't do this one thing? That's not gratitude. That's emotional blackmail. And the only way to break that pattern is to limit what you give and who you give it to. Limiting favors doesn't make you selfish. It makes you sovereign. It means you give freely, not fearfully. You help when it aligns with your values, not when it threatens your peace. Healthy people appreciate your no as much as your yes. Manipulators punish it. And that difference tells you everything you need to know. Start small. Pause before agreeing, assess your motivation, and ask yourself if this favor serves mutual respect or emotional control. When you learn to say, I can't do that right now, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your freedom. Because real kindness has boundaries, and once your help stops being automatic, manipulative people stop seeing you as a resource and start seeing you as someone they can no longer own. Use binary choices. Using binary choices is how you trap manipulation in a corner of your own design. Manipulators thrive on ambiguity and open-ended situations. They pull you into endless debates, half-promises, and emotional spirals until you forget what the original question even was. Their control depends on having infinite exits, always another way to twist the conversation, another loophole to exploit. But when you present clear, limited options, this or that, yes or no, now or never, you strip away their fog, you turn chaos into clarity, and suddenly, they're the ones cornered by reality. Binary choices force accountability. They make the manipulator reveal what they truly want instead of hiding behind endless maybes. If they refuse to pick, you've exposed the game. They were never trying to collaborate, only to control. Each clear boundary you set tightens the frame of truth around them. The manipulator thrives in gray zones. You defend yourself by painting the world in black and white where it matters. You don't need aggression to use this, only calm precision. So, are you saying yes or no? Do you want to continue this conversation respectfully, or should we pause here? Each question becomes a mirror, reflecting their behavior back to them. It forces them to confront choice instead of manipulating emotion. When you master binary framing, you no longer chase understanding. You create structure. You decide the rules of engagement. And in that moment, the manipulator realizes something terrifying. They've lost their favorite weapon, confusion. Because once you reduce their chaos to two simple paths, you're no longer playing their game. You're defining it. Practice self-compassion. Practicing self-compassion is how you heal the wounds that manipulators exploit. Guilt, shame, and self-doubt are their favorite tools. They twist your empathy into a weapon against you. They make you believe you're never doing enough, never kind enough, never right enough. Self-compassion is the antidote. It's the quiet rebellion that says, I am allowed to be human. It's forgiving yourself for falling into traps, for missing red flags, for believing lies dressed as love. When you treat yourself with understanding instead of judgment, you take back the power they once held. Manipulators prey on perfectionists and pleasers, people who tear themselves apart before anyone else has to. They sense that inner critic and feed it until you start policing your own worth. But when you meet your mistakes with gentleness instead of punishment, their influence dissolves. You stop seeking validation from the same hands that hurt you. Self-compassion doesn't make you soft. It makes you solid. It teaches you to stand beside yourself when others abandon you. It quiets the shame that whispers, you deserve this, and replaces it with, you deserve better. It turns regret into wisdom instead of self-blame. This practice is your inner boundary, the one that says, I will not be cruel to myself just because someone else was. It's what keeps your heart open without leaving it unguarded, because once you learn to speak to yourself with the same kindness you've always given others, manipulation loses its grip completely. You stop needing approval to feel worthy. You stop breaking to keep others comfortable. You become your own safe place, and that is power no one can take. Establish a no-surprise rule. Establishing a no-surprise rule is how you protect your stability from being hijacked by manipulation disguised as spontaneity. Manipulators thrive on sudden shifts, unexpected demands, emotional outbursts, last-minute changes that force you to react instead of think. They love catching you off balance because that's when people make concessions, say yes too quickly, or feel guilty for setting boundaries. But when you create a rule that says, no surprises, you dismantle their element of control and reclaim your peace. The no surprise rule is simple. You don't respond to unplanned pressure. No last-minute favors, no emotional ambushes, no urgent decisions without context. It's a declaration that your time and energy are not open for instant access. When you live by it, manipulators are forced into the one thing they hate most: structure. They must plan, clarify, and communicate transparently, or lose the ability to influence you. Surprises are a manipulator's Trojan horse. They arrive looking harmless or exciting, but inside is chaos, an unspoken expectation that you'll drop everything to accommodate them. The no surprise rule teaches others that you value consistency over convenience, clarity over crisis. You may be called rigid, unspontaneous, or cold. That's because the rule exposes people who only thrive in disorder. But with every calm, predictable boundary you set, your world becomes quieter, your choices cleaner. The no surprise rule is not about control, it's about safety. It's the right to exist without being ambushed by someone else's urgency. And once you make it your standard, manipulators quickly learn that their favorite tactic, chaos, no longer works on you. Recognize emotional blackmail. Recognizing emotional blackmail is how you stop confusing love with fear. Manipulators use emotions as currency. They trade guilt for obedience, shame for silence, and affection for control. They'll say things like, "If you really cared, you'd do this," or "After all I've done for you, how could you say no?" They don't need threats when they can weaponize your empathy. Their goal isn't understanding, it's submission. Emotional blackmail thrives on your sensitivity. They know you hate disappointing people, that you fear being seen as cold or ungrateful, so they build invisible cages out of obligation. Every guilt trip, every tearful manipulation, every silent treatment reinforces one message: your comfort costs my approval. And when you believe that, you begin to betray yourself just to keep peace. Recognizing emotional blackmail starts with awareness. The moment a request comes laced with fear, guilt, or implied punishment, pause. Ask yourself, would this person still care for me if I said no? True love, friendship, or respect doesn't demand emotional payment. It allows freedom without fear. When you call it for what it is, you break the spell. Manipulators may escalate, cry harder, rage louder, but that's proof of exposure, not cruelty. They're losing access to the lever they've always pulled. Stay grounded. Breathe. Don't explain. Don't defend. Just hold your boundary. Emotional blackmail loses its power the moment you stop negotiating with it, because love isn't proven through compliance, and care isn't measured by sacrifice. The only people who fear your freedom are the ones who depended on your guilt to control you. Vet requests against your mission. Vetting requests against your mission is how you keep your energy sacred and your purpose intact. Manipulators thrive by pulling you off course, making every distraction sound noble, urgent, or personally tied to you. They disguise detours as opportunities, favors as loyalty, and pressure as teamwork. But when you measure every request against your deeper mission, your goals, your vision, your why, you become immune to their redirection. Your mission is the compass that cuts through manipulation's noise. When you know what you stand for, everything either aligns or it doesn't. The manipulator will try to blur that clarity. They'll say, "It'll only take a minute," or "Don't you care about helping?" But those words lose power when you quietly ask yourself, does this move me closer to my purpose or further away from it? That question is armor. It turns emotional pressure into data, urgency into irrelevance. You don't owe anyone access to your focus. Every yes given without purpose is energy stolen from what truly matters. Manipulators count on your desire to be helpful. They weaponize your empathy. But when your mission sits at the center of every choice, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally. This is not selfishness, it's alignment, because when your energy feeds your mission, You create impact that's honest and unstoppable. You stop scattering your strength across everyone else's agendas and begin channeling it where it counts. And the moment a manipulator realizes they can't lure you away from your direction, they stop seeing you as a target and start seeing you as immovable. Hold space for uncomfortable feelings. Holding space for uncomfortable feelings is how you stop manipulation at its root. Manipulators weaponize discomfort. They rush to fill your silence, twist your unease, and pressure you to escape the tension by giving in. They know that if they can make you afraid of your own emotions, guilt, anger, doubt, they can control your behavior. But when you learn to sit with those feelings instead of fleeing them, you reclaim your freedom. You teach your nervous system that discomfort isn't danger, it's data. When guilt rises after you say no, breathe and let it exist. When fear hums after setting a boundary, don't silence it, observe it. These emotions are echoes of old conditioning, proof that you were once rewarded for self-betrayal, but now you are retraining your body to understand peace built on suppression is not peace, it's compliance. Manipulators thrive in your need for relief. They push your emotional buttons, knowing you'll do anything to stop the pressure. But if you can endure those few minutes of inner heat, if you can stay grounded and not flinch, their entire strategy collapses. They lose access to your triggers because you've stopped fearing them yourself. Holding space for discomfort is not about stoicism. It's about strength with softness. It's whispering to yourself, it's okay to feel this and still not give in. The more you practice this, the more emotional resilience you build. The feelings still come, but they no longer command you. And in that stillness, manipulators find something they can't touch. A person who can feel deeply, yet remain completely in control. Use ritualized check-ins. Using ritualized check-ins is how you stay grounded in truth and prevent slow manipulation from taking root. Manipulators thrive in gradual shifts. The small compromises, the subtle guilt trips, the emotional drift that happens so slowly you don't notice until you've lost yourself. They count on you forgetting how things used to feel, on you normalizing discomfort over time. But ritualized check-ins, whether with yourself, a trusted friend, or a journal, cut through that fog. They force awareness to stay alive. A ritualized check-in is a pause, a deliberate moment to ask, how do I feel right now? What's changed? Am I still respected or just enduring? It's a mirror you hold up to your life regularly, weekly, monthly, whatever keeps you awake to your own reality. Manipulation thrives on erosion. Check-ins rebuild clarity brick by brick. When you make it a ritual, not a reaction, it becomes sacred. You're not waiting for chaos to force reflection. You're creating space for it on purpose. You start to see patterns before they harden, pressure before it becomes control, unease before it turns into compliance. Manipulators hate reflection. They prefer confusion and momentum, constant doing, constant reacting. But when you slow down and check in, you interrupt their rhythm. You stop being their puppet and become your own witness. Ritualized check-ins remind you that awareness isn't a one-time awakening. It's a habit. The more consistently you reflect, the harder it becomes for anyone to twist your truth. Because you're not drifting anymore. You're observing, correcting, and reclaiming control before it's ever taken from you. Ask for limits to be written down. Asking for limits to be written down is how you anchor truth in something manipulators can't twist. Evidence. Words are their favorite weapon. They use charm, confusion, and selective memory to rewrite agreements after the fact. They'll say, "That's not what I meant," or "You must have misunderstood," turning your sanity into a negotiation. But when you ask for things in writing, agreements, boundaries, expectations, you strip them of their most powerful tool, ambiguity. Written words are clarity made visible. They stop manipulation in its tracks because manipulators thrive in the fog of verbal promises. Once you have something documented, they can't shift the story without exposing themselves, and that's what they fear most: accountability. They'll call you paranoid, untrusting, or too formal, not because your request is unreasonable, but because it makes their tactics impossible. Having boundaries in writing is not cold, it's protective. It transforms he said, she said, into truth you can point to, whether it's a work agreement, a financial understanding, or even a personal boundary. Writing turns words into walls that can't be quietly moved when it's convenient for someone else. Manipulators crave fluid rules because fluidity gives them freedom. But when you insist on clarity, you take that freedom away. You remind them that your cooperation depends on transparency, not persuasion. And when they see you won't rely on memory alone, they realize something chilling. You're no longer playing the emotional game. You're dealing in facts. And facts, once written, are the one language manipulation cannot corrupt. Avoid all or nothing thinking. Avoiding all or nothing thinking is how you break free from one of manipulation's most subtle traps: emotional extremes. Manipulators love absolutes: black or white, love or hate, always or never. They weaponize polarization because when your mind is forced into extremes, it loses balance and nuance. You're either with me or against me. If you cared, you'd do this. You always let me down. These phrases aren't communication. They're control disguised as conviction. They push you into guilt or defense, robbing you of calm judgment. When you reject all or nothing thinking, you reclaim complexity, the enemy of manipulation. You learn to say, I can care about you and still disagree. I can help sometimes, but not always. You introduce shades of truth into a world they want painted in absolutes. That middle ground is where your freedom lives. Manipulators use extremes because balance is harder to control. They can twist passion into compliance or disagreement into betrayal only if you accept their limited frame. But when you think in gradients, their tactics fall flat. You stop reacting emotionally and start analyzing patterns. You see that conflict isn't doom, refusal isn't cruelty, and saying no doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. Avoiding all or nothing thinking means living from perspective, not pressure. It allows you to stay grounded when someone tries to drag you into emotional drama, because the truth is rarely absolute. It's layered, subtle, human. And when you think in those layers, the manipulator's black and white world collapses. Their control depends on extremes. Your peace begins in the space between them. Practice low reactivity. Practicing low reactivity is the art of becoming emotionally untouchable. Manipulators survive on reaction. They poke, provoke, and prod until you explode, then use your outburst as proof that you're the problem. They twist your emotions into evidence, spinning your passion into anger, your boundaries into attitude, your calm disagreement into coldness. But when you master low reactivity, their power dies in silence. You stop giving them what they crave, your emotional fuel. Low reactivity doesn't mean apathy, it means emotional mastery. It's the quiet strength of someone who can feel everything without showing it to the wrong audience. It's pausing before replying, breathing before defending, observing instead of reacting. You become the still water that reflects manipulation clearly instead of the storm it feeds on. When you stay composed, manipulators grow desperate. They'll escalate, guilt trip, provoke harder, anything to make you crack. But every moment you remain calm, their influence shrinks. They start to look unhinged next to your composure, their control unraveling under their own noise. Your calm becomes confrontation enough. This discipline takes practice. It's rewiring your instinct to respond instantly. But once you learn to anchor yourself in stillness, no tactic can pull you off balance. You'll notice how your silence becomes louder than shouting, how your measured tone disarms chaos. Low reactivity is power refined. It's not detachment. It's dominance over your own energy. It's knowing that peace isn't passive, it's strategic, because the one who controls their emotions controls the exchange, and the one who controls the exchange can never be controlled. Learn to disengage gracefully. Learning to disengage gracefully is how you take your power back without feeding the chaos manipulators crave. They thrive on reaction, on your anger, your explanations, your desperate need to be understood. Every argument, every emotional plea, every attempt to prove your point is fuel for their control. They don't want resolution, they want attention. The moment you learn to walk away calmly, without theatrics or apology, their entire game collapses. Graceful disengagement is not weakness, it's mastery. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you don't owe anyone a war to validate your truth. You stop wrestling with liars. Stop chasing closure from people who profit from confusion. You realize that your silence is louder than any argument. A manipulator can twist words, but they can't twist your absence. To disengage gracefully, you breathe before responding. You shorten your sentences. You stop defending what's already been decided. In your heart, you say, "I'm not continuing this conversation," and then you follow through. The manipulator will provoke, guilt trip, and mock your composure, desperate to pull you back into their emotional arena, but you won't step in. You've outgrown the performance. Graceful disengagement is control disguised as peace. It's choosing dignity over drama, calm over chaos. It's not about winning. It's about no longer playing. You leave the battlefield without scars because you finally understand not every fight deserves your fire. When you disengage with grace, you become untouchable. You don't slam the door. You simply walk out quietly while they're still shouting. And that silence, that poise, that peace, it's the sound of power reclaiming itself.